I sold my very first thing on eBay way back in 1998. It was a piece of telecommunications equipment that went for $3,000, and I used the proceeds to buy my first car, a red Honda Civic from 1995. I love that car. I've been selling on eBay ever since, and over the years I've gone through pretty much every single selling scenario you can imagine. I've dealt with nightmare buyers, wildly profitable flips, shipping fiascos, you name it, I've seen it. And I share my experiences of selling on eBay right here on this channel. If you're new here, every Monday I publish a new video called This Week in Flips, where I help people like you find success on eBay. I break down strategies to help you avoid the common pitfalls, maximize your sales, and navigate everything from sourcing profitable items to listing nearly anything in 4 minutes or less. My goal is to help you build a thriving eBay business. This video is a compilation of questions pulled from those weekly videos, so check the description below for time codes to jump to the specific questions most relevant to you. And if you have any questions for me, leave them in the comment section below and I'll answer them in a future video. Have fun!
Hey, Justin, Jason again. I know, third time, right? Anyway, your basement tour of all of your shipping and listing and all of those procedures, great video, but it got me wondering, how do you organize your ground advantage boxes? Priority is easy. They come flat, they can stack, they're really super easy. Are you buying regular nondescript boxes to use for ground advantage and just keeping them flat? Or do you just get random boxes from wherever, break them down, and then fold them flat and then reassemble them? Or are you getting your random boxes, keeping them all together, and it's just a big giant Lego tower that's waiting to fall down? Thanks, man. Bye.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate you sending another question in. By the way, if you want to send in a question like that on video, there's a link in the description below. Just click that link and you'll be able to record a video or audio and I'll put you on the channel. But to answer your question, Jason, yeah, it's a good one. Like your priority boxes, I just don't ship priority all that much anymore. It's very rare. And I have a bunch of priority boxes left over from before ground advantage was a thing and I ship priority more. But they are easier to organize because they come flattened and in packaging, and so I have those pretty well organized. But you're right, ground advantage boxes, you can use any box, and so how do you organize all those boxes? And it can be kind of challenging. I'm glad you asked though, because I do want to show off my system. I'm really proud of it. Actually, let's just go take a look at it. So it did take me some time to put this together, and I'm really proud of it. It's, I would consider it just really, really well organized, as you can see. I just, throw them back here in what I call the box jungle. I throw them in the box jungle, and then when I need to ship something, I traipse through there and try not to injure myself and find a box. But really, yeah, I don't have a good method to do it. I literally just throw these boxes back here. Anything I get from buying something myself or from Amazon, they just get thrown back here and get reused. I do buy boxes though, for ground advantage stuff. So those that I buy do come flat packed like that. And I just organize them on this shelf, and I've got a bunch of different ones here, different sizes. I've got 18 by 18 by 6 there on the bottom. That's good for like VCRs. Or DVD VCR combos, things like that. I got 12 by 12 by 8s here. What are these? These are probably 12 by 9 by 5s. What are these? I don't know what these are. 8 by 6 by 4 is a common one. 12 by 12 by 12, 12 by 12 by 10. 10 by 6 by 8, things like that. Those are the boxes that I typically buy. But yeah, I've also got, the flat packed priority boxes down there that I just really don't use all that often anymore. But yeah, that's my box situation. Could definitely use some work. Doesn't look too pretty, but whatever, it works. Everything's still recording here? I hope so. Retro Obscurity asks, do you ever comp using image search? Many items have exact names like those 3M card games, so searching with keywords would get accurate results. Something like the vintage Halloween cardboard cutouts are so generic you might not locate a comp with keywords alone. The eBay image search or Google Lens, which can image search sold eBay listings, might be more accurate. It might streamline your searches. In order of preference, I search, scan, UPC, and then image search, and finally text search. So yeah, thanks for sending that along. There are two main options that you can use to search by image. You can use the Google Lens app, which I think now is a part of the Google Home app or something, I don't know. But you can open up that app and you can do an image search, and it's going to search across Google for items that match that image that you just took, and often pull up eBay search results in that as well. And it's a really great way to identify items that are hard to identify. Maybe they don't have any markings or anything like that. And you snap a picture of it and immediately know what it is. It's really revolutionized how you can comp and find information on hard to identify items. eBay also has a sort of image search built into its app as well. Historically, that image search is terrible. Like, it just didn't work at all. I have noticed though, lately their image search in the app works a lot better. And so I've found myself using that image search before Google's image search just because it's built directly into eBay and it removes one step of having to identify something in the Google Lens search and then coming back over to eBay to search it out. So give that eBay image search a shot. I've found it to be pretty useful and pretty accurate lately when in the past it just wasn't accurate at all. Pierce asks, at what value do you invest in additional insurance when shipping USPS? So when I'm shipping stuff through the post office, typically I'm using the Ground Advantage service, which comes with $100 of insurance. And so I definitely don't buy additional insurance for things less than $100. But honestly, I don't always buy it for things that are over $100 either. It usually depends on what the item is. If it's an item that is very, very valuable, yes, I definitely insure it. I would say at least over $200 to $250, I'll definitely add the extra insurance. Or if I think it can easily break along the way, I'm less worried about missing packages. Not that they don't happen, but for me, it's very rare. But I'm more concerned about breakage along the way. So I definitely don't do it for under $100. I sometimes do it between $100 and $200 if it's an item that I think can easily break along the way. And if it's something that's over $200, over $250, definitely in the $300 range, I definitely add that extra insurance on there just to be safe. DJ asks, have you ever had a sale reversed due to a fraudulent credit card use? If so, did you lose the money and the merch? Was there anything you could have done to avoid the issue? Thanks. Yeah, sometimes that happens. For me, it happens about once a year on average, I would say, where you get a chargeback where a buyer buys something and everything's fine, but 2 or 3 or 6 months later, you get a notice from eBay saying that the buyer has disputed the charge on their credit card, saying it's fraudulent or they don't recognize it or some other thing. When this happens, eBay deals with the credit card company and they follow up on that dispute, but you typically do have to provide some information to eBay if they don't already have it. For example, they might ask you for a tracking number or something like that, and if the tracking shows as delivered and the reason that they're disputing it is that they never bought it or something like that, that typically resolves it. I've probably had 10 credit card disputes over the years personally, and I've never lost money on any of them. Usually holds my money for like 2 to 3 months while the investigation follows through, but I've always gotten my money back without an issue. Some people I've heard don't, but it has never happened to me, so I've always been good. And I don't think it's a big issue. This is out of, 10,000 plus sales. I've had, maybe 10, so it's just really not an issue. All right, Globe Gaming asks, my question is about the sell-through rate. How do you personally calculate it? I've seen sellers do it all sorts of ways. So yeah, sell-through rate. So this is definitely, you hear a bunch of people having different answers for this. And in fact, I've had different answers for this over time. And on this channel even, you can go back and find older videos of mine where I talk about sell-through rate in a very different way. And my thinking has evolved and changed here. And especially as I help educate other resellers out there when it comes to sell-through rate, I just think about it in a different way than I did before. The way I think about it now is it's less about a formula. It's less about doing math in your head, and it's more about a feeling. What you want to do when checking sell-through rate is you want to check the number of active listings an item has, which is your competition, and you want to check the number of sold listings that same item has, which is the demand, how many buyers out there are buying it or have bought it. And you want to compare those two numbers. And I don't need you to do math in your head. I hate doing math in my head. I hate doing math generally, but I also especially hate doing math in my head. So I'm not going to recommend that you do that. Instead, just get a feeling for it. If there's 1 actively listed and 100 sold, that's amazing. That means that over the last 90 days, there's been 100 people coming to eBay looking for it. That's over 1 per day. And there's only 1 active listing out there. That means that if you put another one up, you can expect that to sell within a couple of days, assuming it's priced well and you don't, mess up your listing. But if it's the reverse, if there's 100 listed and 1 sold, well, that means that there is 1 person that comes by every 3 months and they have 100 to choose from. The chances that they select yours is very minimal. It's, it will sell eventually, but it will probably take many, many months, if not years. And so that's what I mean when I say get a feeling for sell-through rate. you will find that most things you look up, it's very clear whether you should be purchasing it or not without having to do any math. And just know again that sold history goes back 90 days. So if you see 90 things have sold, that means one person a day on average comes by to buy it. If you see 900 sold, that means 10 people come by every day on average to buy it. And then see how much competition there is. You know, how many other people are out there selling it? Is it going to be easy for me to stick out? So many things you pick up are going to be like 3,000 actively listed and 75 sold. Like, not a great sell-through rate. I would probably pass on something like that unless the value was extremely high. So yeah, when it comes to sell-through rate, I don't think you need to do any math. You just need to get a feeling for it. Check active, check sold. Spend a few seconds thinking about it when making your decision. Don't worry about doing a bunch of complicated math in your head.
Justin, thanks for your videos. It's helped my husband and I upstart our business. How do you go about limiting your inventory? For example, my husband and I, we've sold 3 items, but we have over 100 items of inventory. Should we chill out on sourcing? Should we keep sourcing? What would you do about that? Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks for sending along that question. By the way, if you have any questions for me that you'd like to send a video and have it featured on the channel like that, there's a link in the description below. I'd love to have you on the channel, so send me a question. But yeah, Natalie, so you have about 100 items listed and you've sold about 3 so far, which is a good start there. I would reverse it back to you and ask you what your goals are. And so are these 100 items that you have just like 100 things around the house that you're trying to get rid of? Or are you trying to turn this into a business? Are you trying to turn it into something that brings consistent money over time? I'm guessing that would be your goal, that you're not just trying to get rid of those 100 items, but you're actually trying to bring in some significant money from reselling. And if that's the case, you definitely want to continue sourcing and continue listing. eBay really rewards sellers who are consistent, and your ability to sell enough inventory over time to bring in a significant amount of money requires that you be consistent both with sourcing and with listing, and of course with shipping. So the best thing that you can do to increase sales on eBay is to list new inventory regularly. And in order to list new inventory regularly, you need to be sourcing new inventory regularly. And so you really want to set up goals and systems for both of those parts of the process so that each week you have, sourcing goals where you're going out as much as you possibly can given your schedule, and you want to be picking up as much new inventory as possible. And then you want to be setting listing goals. I recommend daily listing goals. So for example, I try to list 5 things every day. Whatever the number is, try to set a goal and stick with it, because that's what's going to bring in sales, is getting those items up on eBay and out there for sellers to buy and doing it on a consistent basis. So eBay really likes that consistency, and the more consistent you are, the better your sales are going to be. So really think about what you're trying to achieve with your eBay business. Set some goals, stick with those goals. And yeah, if you're trying to bring in money, you want to be continuously sourcing, continuously listing, and really just building that machine, that sourcing and listing and shipping machine that you can repeat over time. And that's when the dividends will start to pay out. That's when you'll start to see a lot of success, is when you are consistently doing this stuff every day, for a couple months. That will start to snowball, and you'll start to get a lot of sales, and you'll start to bring in a lot of good extra income.
What do you include in your packages to improve your return customer rate? We drop a lot of stickers, newsletters, postcards, but I'm wondering if you've had any success with anything lately.
Thanks, Martin. I appreciate you sending in a video like that. If you'd like to send in a video question similar to Martin here, you can do so. There's a link below. I'd love to have you on the channel. I don't get a whole lot of repeat customers personally. I sell across all categories, and it's rare that I get people who want to come back and buy more of my random stuff. If you sell in a particular category, and based on your email address, it looks like you sell in the comic book category, you do want to invest more time and energy into trying to build repeat customers. And that's if your store is exclusively one particular niche, like comic books. And some common ways to do that are thank you cards, throwing in some freebies, stickers, even extra comic books, low-cost comic books. I know that there's a lot of different strategies like that. Personally, I don't do any of it because I just don't get a whole lot of repeat business. And if you're like me and you're selling across all categories, I wouldn't really recommend you invest a whole lot of time and energy into trying to build a base of loyal followers on eBay. I just don't think it's worth the squeeze, really. I'm not going to discourage you from doing it. I think it's a nice thing if you want to provide thank you notes and all of that. I just don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's going to produce a lot of repeat buyers.
Hey, Justin, do you ever go to outside appraisers for any items before you list them? Recently, I acquired some Harry Potter first edition books. Some of them are first printings, but the one that they were asking was a 21st printing here, and ended up ending the listing because I had honestly no idea of just how much it could be worth based on people's reaction to it. It seemed to be a lot more than what I was asking. They seemed to be in disbelief.
Hey, thanks for asking. I hope the witness protection program's going okay for you. I don't think I've ever used an appraiser for anything, mostly because the type of things that I sell are not that interesting, and it's easy for me to research the value on my own. But if I did get something that I felt would benefit from getting an appraiser, I certainly would. The only time I've come close to consulting with an appraiser is when I picked up earlier this year this Murano glass lamp, which I think is a Murano glass, but I'm not 100% sure. And so it might be a good idea for me to go out and get that appraised and ensure that it definitely is a Murano, or rule out that it's a Murano glass, because I don't have that type of knowledge. That's the closest I've come to using an appraiser in that case, but definitely recommend it for books. I know there's tons of companies out there that will help you appraise it. You just got to weigh the cost of that appraisal versus the potential value. And so if it's going to increase the value a ton by having it appraised, it may be worth it, but if not, it may not be worth it. So that's what you want to consider. Troy asks, question, I print my shipping labels through eBay and I always wait for a receipt from the post office when I drop off my packages. Do you feel it's necessary to get a receipt from the post office? And if so, how long do you keep them? So I don't get a receipt from the post office. I never have. I've been pretty lucky in that my local post office is pretty reliable. I'm able to just go up to the counter, drop my packages off. I don't even wait for them to get scanned, and I just really don't have any issues. But I get that not everyone's post office is that reliable, and there may be a good reason for you to wait to get those items scanned and to get a receipt. So if you're looking to avoid issues there, you definitely want to make sure that you see your packages get scanned. Get a receipt if you need to. Again, I've never gotten one. I've never had the need to prove to anyone that I had items scanned. I'm not exactly sure how that would happen. Maybe if you know in the comments below, if you have a less reliable post office and you do keep your receipts and you've used those receipts to prove something, let us know in the comments below. But for me, my post office is pretty reliable. I don't even wait for them to get scanned, and it's never been an issue. JT asks, hey Justin, great videos. Thank you. I'm curious, do you think the new thrift store practice of pricing most inventory way up in response to reselling will end up backfiring on them? We are seeing Goodwills and Savers with increasingly overflowing shelves and donation areas. Stuff isn't selling at higher prices, and donated areas are backlogged from what must be a policy of looking up everything on eBay before pricing it. Frankly, they look like giant hoarders. Wouldn't the better business model be to shoot for volume sales, especially since their inventory is sourced for free? Hey JT, it's a good question. Why are thrift store prices the way that they are? I think Goodwill is a great example to talk through, because Goodwill has a really strong operation for how they do this. And think about it though, they're just incentivized to try to get as much money as possible from their inventory. At the end of the day, they are a business. They're trying to generate as much revenue as possible. So they are incentivized to price their items as high as possible. But just look at their operations, for example. When new inventory comes in, they sort of skim off the top the most valuable inventory and take that to a different marketplace where they can get more money for it. They either put it up on their own eBay accounts or they put it up on Shop Goodwill. And then for everything else that is not considered worthwhile selling on those online marketplaces, they put them into their stores. And again, they're incentivized to price them at higher price points because they have a system in place to systematically lower those prices over time. And so it makes sense for them to put these high priced items out on the shelves. And if somebody buys it, great. But if nobody buys it, then the following week or the following 2 weeks or whatever, when that price tag's color comes up for a discount, it's going to be lowered slightly. And then if somebody buys it at the slightly lower amount, great. But if not, it gets slightly lowered again until it gets to the point where it doesn't sell at all. And then they take that inventory out of the stores and they ship it off to their Goodwill outlets, or they send it off to other stores, or they think it might perform better. But typically when it ends up at the outlets, then they're charging by the pound. And if it gets sold there, great. If it doesn't get sold there, then they are, I don't know what they're doing with it exactly. They talk about being sustainable and trying to keep it out of the landfill. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but my point is they have these systems set up to incentivize them to price things higher, knowing that if it doesn't sell at that price, it'll systematically get lowered over time until it eventually sells, or it doesn't, and they get rid of it out of their inventory. So I don't think they're in the game of selling at volume, just because they have all these other outlets, right? They have all these other places they can send the inventory if it doesn't sell at the price that they want. So they are less interested in selling lots of different items, and they are more interested in maximizing the revenue, because at the end of the day, it's a business. Nora asks, how do you keep records for what you buy at yard sales, etc., when there's typically no receipt given? yeah, you're definitely not going to get a receipt at a garage sale. So how do you keep records? How do you keep your cost of goods? How do you make sure you're good for tax time? And what you want to do is just in some way record that data so that you don't lose it and so that you can reference it later. A lot of people will use like a notebook, just write down, I bought this thing at this time and paid this much. And, it's basically writing your own receipt, writing your own ledger. And there's tons of different ways that you can do that. You can, again, you can do it on a piece of paper in a notebook. You could do it in a spreadsheet using Google Sheets. It's free. I personally put all my cost of goods into Flipwise, which is my eBay automation platform and inventory management system. So tons of different ways that you can do it. You just want to make sure you record it so that you can reference it later. But there's no expectation that you're going to get a receipt at a garage sale. It's just not going to happen. So make your own receipt.
Hey, Justin, Dan here.
Hey, Dan.
I follow you and watch all your videos, and I got to tell you, you provide the most information that I've ever gotten and have helped our business a lot.
Awesome.
Biggest help in our business has been Flipwise. Amazing. Love
Thank
it.
you.
One question about it, though. When will we be able to add sales from outside of eBay? If I don't have to track those, I don't have to use anything. Everything goes into Flipwise, and I got to tell you, just an amazing app. Keep up the great work. Appreciate you more than you know. Thank you, Thrifty OC.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate the kind words for sure. Yeah, so it's a great question. A lot of users have been asking about wanting to manage sales when they happen outside of eBay, and I'm excited to say that it is finally out there. We finally released this last week, so you can, in Flipwise now, manage sales outside of eBay. You can do that in two ways. You can either mark an existing ended eBay item as sold outside of eBay, and that's on any marketplace that you want, even including like your local antique booth or flea market. Or you can add a new product to Flipwise entirely for the purposes of marking it sold on any other marketplace. Check it out. It's pretty cool.
Hey, Justin, it's Jason. First off, love the content and love the videos. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My question is, when you purchase an item from, for example, a thrift store and you have to pay sales tax on that item, are you including the sales tax in your purchase price, or are you just doing the sticker price that was listed on the item? For example, are you doing $1.99 or $2.14 after tax? Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks, Jason. That's a good question. By the way, if you want to send in your own video question like that, you can do so. There's a link in the description below. I'd love to have you on the channel. But to answer your question, Jason, yeah, you want to include the sales tax there. That's an expense to you as the seller in this situation. And so if you bought something for $1.99 and there was 12 cents, or I guess it would be more than 12 cents, 50 cents of taxes, you want to include that sales tax in your cost of goods because that is the total expense that you paid to purchase the item and is represented as your cost of goods. So yeah, definitely include it. Super asks, what do you do when you find an item that is nowhere on the internet? Good question. Sometimes you will pick something up and you just cannot find any information on it at all. You'll search sold comps on eBay that go back 90 days and you'll find nothing. You can also switch over to Terapeak, or I think it's called Product Research now. That goes back 3 years, and sometimes you'll go there and still can't find any information. Some people pay for an account on WorthPoint, which is it's not affiliated directly with eBay, but they have some agreement with eBay that allows them to ingest and retain their historical listings going back, I don't even know, 10 years, maybe longer. So that's another thing that you can do, but it's a pretty expensive service, but could be worth it if you sell a lot of things that are rare or unique and are not often on eBay. Or you could just start doing Google searches and see if you can find something. But yeah, you'll run into stuff that is just one of a kind, that you don't have any idea of what the price can be or what the supply is, or there's no supply and you don't know what the demand is. And that is a good opportunity to use an auction. And you'll even see here, Devin responded to Zuper here saying, Justin would auction it. I bet money on that. He's right. I would auction that in most cases. If I just couldn't find any information on it at all, I would auction it. I use auctions so rarely, once out of every 500 listings, I would say. It's really only when 3 conditions are met. It's when the supply is low. So in this case, the supply is 0, so it's very low. It's when the demand is high. You can't really gauge the demand of something that has no presence on the internet. So not knowing the demand is kind of okay in this scenario. Preferably, you know the demand and it's something that's a very high demand, so you run an auction for it. But in this case, since the item is unknown, you just don't know the demand. It could be very high, could be very low. There's one way to find out, and that's to list it as an auction. And then the third condition for an auction is that it has an unknown market value, meaning you just don't know how to price it. And so if there's no record of it on the internet anywhere, it's a good bet that you just probably don't know how to price it. So definitely a good candidate for auctions. So Devin's right. I would auction it.
Hey, Justin. So first of all, thanks for all the advice and help that you put out each week. It's been super helpful
Sure.
and super informative for me personally. So I just started reselling back in July, just super part-time, but it's already becoming a good amount of work for me on top of my full-time job. I played around with the idea of bringing on a partner to scale the business because I thought it could scale really well with some added hands. And I've got someone hooked on the idea now who wants to join me. But I'm starting to think it might be a little complicated with splitting workloads and payouts and things like that. So I guess I was just wondering, have you ever done a partnership on an eBay reselling business before? And if you have any advice on that? Thanks.
Thanks, Taylor. Appreciate you sending that in. I've never done a partnership like that. I do, I work on this with my wife, and obviously our partnership extends beyond just the business, but I think that's pretty different than what you're asking. And I do think that that can be a pretty dangerous thing to get into, and you'd want to really pick the right partner because getting into a business partnership like that is very much like getting into a marriage, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And you want to make sure that you all have the same ideals and you have the same ideas of what you want out of this business and how you want to operate it, and someone that you trust. Because you get somebody in there who you can't trust, you're going to have a lot of problems. I think reselling is a unique industry where a partnership could be very difficult to pull off, honestly. And the things that kind of are popping into my mind when I think about this are, if your reselling business is contingent upon you and your partner separately going out and sourcing for new inventory at things like flea markets and garage sales and thrift stores, I feel like it'd be really difficult to know that everything you find, you're going to be splitting with someone else. And what if you're out there and you find something really sweet, really expensive, worth a lot of money, and you're thinking, wow, but I did that work, I found that, but I still have to give up 50% of it back to my partner on this. And again, it could totally work if you and your partner are genuine and trustworthy and all that. It can totally work, but I could just see, because they're with reselling, it's like very much an individual sport almost, where you're out there and you're on your own discovering things. But if your reselling business maybe is different and you're sourcing inventory, for example, like at scale, buying Amazon pallets, there's less of a hunt out there. You're kind of jointly going in and paying for the splitting the expenses and then splitting the profits from it. I think that could work out better, but I don't know. I mean, give it a shot. I would definitely say make sure that you trust this person and that you want to go into a long-term relationship with them, because it's very, very much like a long-term relationship. It can be attractive. You basically have, you have double the person power. You have two people out there sourcing, you have two people to do the shipping, and you have two people to do every part of the process. So I think it can definitely be attractive, but a lot of difficulty along the way. So be careful out there.
Hey Justin, I had a question. I noticed sellers never mentioned anything about self-employment tax and income tax and your state tax. What does that look like for you, and how much do you save towards that? Thanks, man.
Yeah, appreciate you sending along the question. I don't talk a whole lot about tax, income tax in particular on this channel. One, because I'm not an expert there, and there are tons of other experts out there, and I don't want to pretend to know what I'm talking about. And I also just don't want to give bad advice for something as important as taxes. So I tend to shy away from giving tax advice. And another reason is it's so specific to every individual in their situation. And so my situation is just going to be very different than some other person's situation. Everyone's very different when it comes to income tax. For example, if you're self-employed, yeah, you do have to save more for those self-employment taxes because you're not contributing to Social Security and other things like that. Whereas if you're doing this as a side hustle and you have a full-time job as a W-2 employee, it could be that you're contributing to those through that job and you don't need to take money from reselling to contribute to those. And so that's where a CPA comes in really handy. I have a CPA that I engage with every year who helps me do my taxes and tells me the right way to do it. What I do personally as a part-time reseller, I set aside 20% of everything and save that for tax time. And typically that's more than what I need for my particular tax situation. You may need less, you may need more. That's why you should talk to a CPA. But for my specific situation, 20% is a good round number for me. And it typically is a little bit more than I need to be saving. But it's nice because then I have a nice little buffer at the end of the year. This person asks, when you do run an auction, do you start with a low or high minimum bid? So I run an auction about 1 in every 500 listings or so. So it's very rare rare, and it depends on what I'm auctioning off. If it's something that is in super high demand that I just know is going to have no problem selling and getting a ton of interest, I'll start it lower because I think it's more enticing for a buyer to see that low amount and want to get in on it. But if it's something I'm not quite sure, which is typically that's how it is, I'm not quite sure what the demand is. I think it might be high, but I'm not really sure. I basically will put my minimum first bid at the lowest that I would be willing to accept it for. So if I think something is going to go between $50 and $100, I might be okay getting like 35 to 40. I'll start the minimum bid there and let it go up after that. But I'm not an expert on auctions. I don't do them very often. You may find some other YouTubers or people giving better advice on auctions. I just don't use them that much, but that's what I do. KM asks, is there a way to promote all of your listings at one time for the 2%, or do I have to go back one at a time? Good question. eBay does have a bulk editor tool. It actually works really well, so you definitely don't need to do them one at a time. I'll show you how to do it here. It's pretty easy. You open up your seller hub here and go to listings and active. And on the top left here, you're going to have a blank checkbox in the column headers. If you select that, that's going to select all of them on one page. So you'll see here, I have 1,100 listings and there's 100 selected. But if you want to select all of them, you can actually hit the edit button and hit edit all 1,114 listings for mine. That's going to open up this new interface like this, where you have all of those listings here. Then you just select all of them like this. And then you hit the bulk edit tool and you can change the, where is it? Promoted listings. Yeah, promoted listings. So you click that and you can update the promoted listings of all of them to some specific ad rate. It takes a couple seconds, so much faster than doing it one by one. And you can change all sorts of stuff in bulk using this bulk editor tool. So it's pretty handy. Definitely want to use it. Other Justin asks, had something new happen recently, was wondering how you handle it. Someone bought something and then started a return, stating they ordered it for parts and were returning the rest, and to give them a partial refund. Never seen that before. But it doesn't surprise me. There's some buyers out there doing the craziest things. And that's just like, that's really rude. You're buying an item so that you can pull parts out of it and send it back and get a partial refund. People, that's the thing. Selling on eBay, it's a service job, right? You're dealing with the public. You're going to run into people that are rude. You're going to run into people that are unethical, but you're also going to run into a lot of people who are completely fine and normal human beings. This person, that's not normal behavior. That's kind of trashy to be doing something like that, but there's really not much you can do about it, honestly. I don't know, actually, you may want to reach out to eBay on this one. You may be able to deny a return. I mean, I guess if you have returns turned on, you need to accept the return. I accept the return for any reason. And so I would accept this return. I would give them a partial refund. That's the thing too, is a lot of people get bent out of shape about transactions that don't go right. And you may lose some money out on this one, but you have to keep the big picture in perspective. Let's say you lose $25 or even $100 on this order because of this shady buyer. On a small scale, that stinks and nobody likes losing money. But on the larger scale, having one buyer out of 1,000, that does this, you're making way more money. The opportunity to make way more money is so far greater than the few dollars you might miss out on scammy buyers like this. And so I try not to let these situations get me down. I definitely try not to let them impact the trajectory of my total business. In my lifetime, I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars on eBay. If I let one or two buyers like this who pulled some scams or were doing weird behavior like that, if I let them impact my business, I would be losing out on far more than the money I would lose out on a single transaction that went wrong like this. And so my advice here is to just be like, wow, some buyers are crazy. Do what they ask, give them their partial refund. If you can part it out even more and get some more money out of it, great. But just know that most buyers are not going to do this, and it's a rare occasion. So I would just figure it out and move on, and don't let it impact your total business here. Video Game Trader asks, I've pretty much refused to list anything expensive in the video game and collectibles category since I hear horror stories of sellers being scammed out of thousands of dollars. What are your thoughts on listing items worth more than $1,000 and how to protect against being scammed by a buyer? Thanks, Video Game Trader. Definitely a good question to ask. So just to start answering this question, first thing is scams on eBay happen. I'm not going to say that they don't happen, but the fear of them happening is way overblown. The thing is, you hear these horror stories because nobody goes to Reddit or the eBay forums or YouTube to talk about all of the thousands of successful transactions they have on eBay. They go to talk about the horror stories. And so it can feel really unbalanced because it feels like you almost hear nothing but the horror stories. But I've sold well over 10,000 items on eBay over the years, and I can literally count on one hand how many times I've been scammed. And of those times that I've been scammed, only one time have I got like a real legit return scam where I sold something, they opened up a return and sent something back completely different. I can't remember what I sold, but they sent back like a really cheap Pokemon card. The fear of it happening is just way, way, way overblown. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Obviously it does, but the fear of it happening is way overblown. And of those times I've got scammed, I've never ever lost money, not a single time. So if you are considering not going into business on eBay because you are fearful of the scams, I would encourage you to just not worry about it. Again, if you sell enough, it is probably going to happen. But think about this. If I let this one return scam that I got out of over 10,000 other orders, that means I would let one bad human being out there dictate my income, hundreds of thousands of dollars that I would have lost out if I just got discouraged because one person opened up a return scam on me. So that's a good way to think about it. Don't let one person out there impact the potential of selling on eBay. That's the advice that I will give you there. The truth is, the only way to completely avoid being scammed is to not sell anything at all. That's the only way you can avoid it. Even going in person and cash on Facebook Marketplace has the potential of getting scammed. There's just no situation where you're selling something where the risk is zero. Or if you're operating a brick and mortar store, for example, you have to deal with theft. You have to deal with shoplifting, things like that. There's just no scenario out there where you're in business and you're completely avoiding getting scammed by other human beings. You can't avoid it no matter what. And eBay's no different. But the most common scams you're going to run into as a seller on eBay are folks that reach out after buying, trying to get a partial refund. They'll say like, oh, you sent this shirt and it had a stain on it, or the part of the VCR doesn't work, whatever. They're going to have some story about how something doesn't work or isn't as described. And they're not going to open up a case. They're going to send you a message. And what they're doing is fishing for a partial refund. I've said this in many of my previous videos. You really never want to give partial refunds because 9 times out of 10, savvy buyers are trying to just get money back by complaining about something. So when you run into this situation, you pretty much always want to say, ooh, that sucks. Sorry to hear that. Please open up a return, send it back, and I will refund your money. 9 times out of 10, they're just going to go away. The only times I ever give a partial refund is if the buyer is describing a problem, which I think could actually be true, where like maybe I didn't check completely to make sure that it was stain free, or I don't remember if I tested that particular component, especially if I'm going to potentially lose money by having a buyer send back a broken item that I can't relist, then I will give a partial refund. But that's rare. Most of the times I just say, hey, sorry about that, send it back and I'll give you a refund, and they just end up going away. That's the vast majority of scams that are happening on eBay. These return scams where you sell something and then they send you back something completely different. Again, they happen, but it is very, very rare that they happen. I would not let that risk dictate whether you sell on eBay or not. But if it does happen, because again, it does happen, and it has happened to me once, is just get eBay on the phone. They actually have really good customer service. It can be difficult to get them on the phone, but once you do get them on the phone, they're actually really helpful. They're nice. I've really never had a bad experience talking to an eBay rep on the phone in this situation. So when I sold that item and I got the Pokemon card returned instead, what ended up happening after talking to eBay on the phone is that they sided with both of us. They did end up giving the buyer back their money, but it did not come out of my funds, which does suck a little bit. But that's eBay's problem. Like, I think it encourages more scams like that, but that's eBay's decision to make. If they want to do that, they can do that. I didn't lose any money on it though, so I'm okay with the situation. I would also not waste your time filming yourself packing up your items and taking them to the post office or opening up your returns when you get them in the mail. eBay does not accept videos like that as evidence in cases like this, and for good reason. It's just very easy to fake. Like, I could very easily film myself packing up an item, taping it up, putting the label on there, and then I could stop recording and I could open up the package and put something else entirely in the box and print another label and send that off. It's just way too easy to fake a video like that. So eBay does not accept that as evidence. Don't waste your time and effort making a video of yourself packing or unpacking the items. It's just a waste of time. Brian asks, when I'm looking at an item to decide whether or not it is good for purchasing, I was wondering whether other people's items that have sold, if there's a way to know how long they had it listed before it sold. Kind of a way of judging, is this a good item to purchase and sell? Sure, thanks, Brian. I don't know that there's a way to tell for how long an item has been listed through eBay. I don't think that there is. There may be something that tells you like how long it's left until the listing expires, but I don't think that's going to tell you how many times it's been automatically relisted by eBay, for example. So you have no real way, to my knowledge, to look at an item through search, an active item through search, and see that it's been listed for a year, for example. But what you want to do instead is get a similar type of information by looking at the sold listings. And so when you're out trying to buy stuff to resell, you're at a thrift store, you're at a flea market, and you're trying to decide, is this something worth reselling or not? There's a lot of variables you want to look at before deciding whether or not to buy it to resell. The first and most important item is just understanding its value. And you can't just look at active listings to understand its value, because active listings are the active market value. And that's often very different than the sold market value. Often things are listed for much higher than they actually sell for. So you want to look at both active and sold to get an understanding of the difference between the two. And that'll help you determine what the actual value of your item is. The actual value of the item is what it's selling for, not what it's listed for. But while you're doing this, you can also look at the sell-through rate. And that will help you determine how long it's going to take for an item to sell roughly. It's not like an exact science. It's not going to tell you this thing will sell in 45 days and 13 hours, but it is going to give you a rough idea of how long it's going to take to sell by comparing the number of sold listings to the number of active listings, or that's known as the sell-through rate. A lot of people like to use a specific formula for sell-through rate. I do not advocate for a specific sell-through rate formula. Instead, I advocate for a feeling. You should be getting a feeling for what the sell-through rate is on something. And what I mean by that is you want to check the number of active listings. Let's say there's 100. You want to check the number of sold listings. Let's say there's 10. That means there's 100 active listings identical to yours. That means 100 other people are trying to sell the same thing that you are. That's your competition. And then there's 10 sold listings. That means only 10 buyers have come by in the last 90 days to find this particular item and buy it. And so when they do that, so that's like, what is that? 10 divided by 90. That's like, yeah, that means one buyer comes by once every 9 days, about once a week roughly, to buy the item. And then there's 100 out there to choose from. And so with that, you can kind of start to understand how long it could take for your item to sell. That's not an excellent sell-through rate. It could be that your item would take many, many months, even upwards of a year plus, to actually sell, because let's say that nobody else listed any of these exact same items and they were just one buyer per week is coming by. That's 100 weeks that yours would potentially take to sell. That's roughly 2 years. And so that's not accounting for any situations where other people might list the same thing, also increasing that total number of active listings in your competition. So again, not an exact science, but doing this, you can start to get a feel for how long it takes for something to sell by checking these metrics. BCM asks, I just attempted to list a hair diffuser. I got a notification that I could not list it due to the product safety policy. However, there are several currently listed and some recently sold that are the same model as the one I'm attempting to list. Why did my listing not make it through, but others did? I'm not out much on the purchase price, but I'm out more than $20 of potential profit. That's higher than my average profit per item amount. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and experience. You're welcome. Thanks for sending a question along. So yeah, this is a really annoying thing on eBay where they're inconsistent with enforcing their policies. And I'm all about staying within the policies that eBay has, but it's a little frustrating when there is so much inconsistency with how they enforce those policies. And so in this case, they have an item that they've said is not allowed to be sold for safety reasons, yet you see all sorts of people selling it, listing it and selling it without facing any repercussions at all. And you're like, well, why is mine getting caught in this then? And I don't really know. I don't know if it's inconsistency with their automated systems that check for this stuff. I don't know if people are listing these things and leaving out certain keywords that allows them to go around eBay's policies in that way. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but here's my advice to you. Don't try to sell it. It's just not worth risking your eBay account for one single sale. So if you're trying to sell something that eBay doesn't want you to sell, just don't sell it. You may miss out on the opportunity of making $20, but I would much rather have that than risk losing my account entirely. And when you lose your eBay account like that, you can't get one back. They make it very, very difficult for you to set up a new account. They have all sorts of very successful systems in place that ensure once your account is banned, you cannot create another one. So it's just not worth the risk. And the inconsistencies, yes, they are very annoying, but just let it go. If eBay has deemed this thing as not safe to sell, just don't try to sell it. I mean, you could try to sell it on another platform, but again, I just would not open myself up to the risk that comes with selling a recalled product. There's a reason these items are recalled. There's a reason that other platforms and marketplaces aren't selling them anymore. And that's because it's a liability. So just don't sell it.
Justin, how's it going, man?
Hey.
Good. It's crazy that I'm here asking you a question on this video format.
It is crazy.
Coming at you from sunny SoCal, from my mom's bedroom, from her iPhone. I'm using it when she's not here. She gets normally pretty pissed when I use her technology without her permission, so I got to make this quick. But yeah, I've been selling on eBay for a little more than a year now, and I've really loved it so far. It's really given me some cool opportunities and allowed me to really, punch through some walls and all that. And the question I have for you today is, right now, my goal right now is to make $1,000 a week profit off eBay. That's the goal I've been trying to reach for a while, and I'm getting pretty close to that relatively. But I wanted your advice to what strategy would you recommend I use to get there to my goal? I don't know if you already have a video on this on your channel already, but I don't know if you had any secret methods you're withholding from us potentially that can take us to the stars in the stratosphere, man. So yeah, dude, I love what you do. Your videos kick ass, and I'm gonna keep watching, man, whenever my mom's not home. So yeah, dude, and when she leaves her phone here. So yeah, dude, keep it up. You rock. I'll see you on the other side. Take care.
Hey Noah, thanks for sending that in. Say hello to your mother for me. But it's a good question. You want to make $1,000 net per month. How do I get there? You're sort of close, but how do you raise it up even more? And there's a couple ways to think about that. I do have another video on this subject specifically. It's called How to List Anything in 4 Minutes or Less, which goes through my quick listing process end to end, and then also talks about kind of this very thing, like how do you set realistic goals based on sort of the data from your own store to understand what you have to do to increase your sales to some goal amount beyond where you're at. And it involves some data. It involves pulling some data and doing some calculations, and I provide a free spreadsheet to do all that. But the way you want to think about it is, right now you're buying and selling a certain type of inventory. I don't even know what it is. Frankly, it doesn't even matter. But that inventory is performing at a certain rate. And so let's just say you're selling kind of across all types of inventory and you're making $700 net per month. How do you get that up to $1,000? Well, you have trends, and looking through your data will help you see those trends, and you have averages. And so if you're listing 100 things a week and selling 80 things a week, and if you have an average sale price of like $40 per sale and an average net per sale of about $20, you start to have the math that you need to project out how you would need to increase your numbers in order to hit a specific goal. And that, makes a lot of assumptions. It assumes that you can find the same quality of inventory, at a higher scale, which sometimes is not the case. Sometimes, you hit a wall with the inventory that you can find. And in order to get new inventory, you kind of have to lower the quality that you get, and your average sale price may go down. And so it's not perfect, but there is some math you can do. I'm going to link you over to that video so you can learn more about it, but it's totally possible to sort of do the math and figure out what you would need to do in order to hit a specific revenue goal based on your history and based on the data there. So check out that video. I think it's going to give you everything you need to figure that out. If you want to send in a question over a video, check the description below. I've got a link on how you can do that, either video or audio. So would love to have you on the channel. Wolfox Phantom X asks, do you offer returns if you sell a new sealed item and it doesn't work when they open it? I sold a sealed Bluetooth headset and the buyer demanded a refund when he opened it and it didn't work. Am I responsible for something that's beyond my control like that? That is an excellent question. Technically, you are responsible for it, but there are some things that you can do as a seller. eBay does offer you some certain seller protections in this case. I believe the rules, if you offer free returns or if you are a top rated seller, one of those two, you are able to give partial refunds when the item that you sold is returned to you in a condition that's different than when you sold it. So if you sold something brand new in the packaging and you get it returned and it's opened, you are authorized to refund up to only 50% of the original price back to the buyer. And I make pretty heavy use of that when it happens. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, I definitely do that. If I can resell the item, I try to figure out how much I can resell it for and then refund the buyer basically the difference of loss that I would get from reselling it in used condition. Now, the buyers are not going to like this at all. Often they'll be very mad at you, they'll leave you negative feedback, and they'll reach out to eBay, and eBay will refund them the full amount, but it won't come from your funds, and so you're protected from eBay on that. But yeah, that's a benefit of being a top-rated seller and or offering free returns. Karen asks, what can you do if you put in, let's say, a Denim & Company shirt, so some of those come up, but then all these other brands of shirts come up as well? Was as specific as I could be in the description box. I don't feel like it's comparing apples to apples. Is it better to be general or more specific when typing in the search bar? Thanks, Karen. It's definitely a good idea to be as specific as possible, but every once in a while you run into these items that can be difficult to search for because of their name. And Denim & Company as a brand is one of those situations because denim, people are going to be using the word denim in their title for all sorts of things that are not a Denim & Company shirt or piece of clothing. Same goes for the word company. Like there's all sorts of things that will have that in the title that has nothing to do with that brand. I think what you can do in this situation though is make sure that you're using some of the filtering options because eBay does allow you to filter by brand. And so if you set the brand as Denim & Company there on the left of search, that should exclude all of those other items that have denim in the title but are not of the brand Denim & Company. So that's the best way to handle that. But what you're saying is a hard problem. And when you're trying to do research, your goal is to get the most accurate list of search results that match the item that you have in your hand, both active and sold. And that can be difficult to do. So sometimes you can't just rely on the search box. You need to use those filters on the left, and it does slow your process down a little bit, but that's the way you want to go about doing that. The Shangler asks, hey Justin, so I just had a less than ideal situation that I want to hear your take on. I had a buyer buy a ton of vintage Star Wars items, so I sent out all of it in the same box, but it seems that one of the items had a different buyer. That buyer just opened an item not arrived case and is pretty mad. Thoughts? Well, yeah, I'd probably be pretty mad if I was that buyer as well because they paid for an item and then never got it. And so you made a mistake here. You accidentally, put a bunch of items together that you thought were going to the same buyer. Turns out one of those items was not going back to the same buyer. So what you need to do immediately is just refund that buyer. They don't have the item. They paid for it. Give them their money back. Consider it a canceled loss. What you can try to do is get that item back from the buyer that you accidentally sent it to. They're really under no obligation other than their own ethics to return that item back to you. And so hopefully they do. Talk to them, give them a prepaid shipping label. You can do that. You can go to Pirate Ship and create a label from their address to your address and mail it to them. Somehow get that item back to you and then you can relist it and resell it. Some people try to work it out so that one buyer can send the item that was wrongly sent to them to the other buyer. I would not recommend that. It's just a hassle to try to coordinate and a lot of things can go wrong. So refund your buyer, say sorry, admit your mistake, and then reach out to that other buyer and say, hey, I accidentally sent you something that I shouldn't have sent you. Can you please send it back?
Hey, Justin. My name is Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
I've been watching your channel the last couple months, and I appreciate all the advice that you have given all of us. I plan to switch over to Flipwise from a certain platform, but I have 3 questions before I do that. Flipwise, do you plan to develop an app for the App Store? I've noticed a lot of resellers use their phone for a lot of stuff pertaining to eBay, and it would definitely make everything a lot easier. My second question is, I've noticed when you're pulling Flipwise up on your personal computer on the videos, there is a picture of the item. Do I have to manually upload that, or does it take it straight off the listing? My third question is, I have a store that's about 350 listings. I'm looking to upgrade to 500, then hopefully in the future, 1,000. My question is, does the price go up every time I put an increment of listings on? If so, what are the price increments that it goes up? Hey, thank you for answering my question, and I appreciate everything you do for the reselling community. And I hope that you hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, man. Thank you.
Right on, Kevin. Thank you so much for sending in that question. By the way, if you want to send in a question like this, you're welcome to. There's a link in the description below. Click that. You can record a video or record your audio of asking a question, and I'll put you on the channel like that. But Kevin, to answer your question here, you got a couple about Flipwise. So Flipwise is the eBay automation platform that I built that automates the record keeping process so that you don't have to do any manual data entry. You don't have to keep spreadsheets so that you know how your business is performing or be ready for tax time. Flipwise kind of does all of that for you automatically. And so your questions here, do you plan to develop an app? And so Flipwise is what's called a responsive web application. So it works in the browser. It's not a native app. It doesn't, show up in the App Store or whatever Google's App Store is called, the Play Store maybe. But it's a responsive web app. So it works in the browser and it works on literally any device that has a browser and a internet connection. So it does work on your mobile device. You just pull it up in your mobile browser. It's fully functional across all devices. And so it does actually work on your phone, but we don't have a standalone app. We may introduce a standalone app in the future. If we did, it would be kind of just a wrapper of what the experience is right now. Because again, it's fully functional on mobile right now. And so we may sort of wrap it in a native app and then put that in the App Store to make it easy to access via an app that way. So we may do that in the future, but you can use it on your mobile devices right now. So your second question here, do I have to manually upload the image? No. So when you sign up for Flipwise, it ingests all of your active listings and all of your sold listings going back 2 years. So it brings all of that data in, including the pictures, and allows you to define your acquisition data, which is what we call kind of your cost of goods, where you bought your items from, when you bought it, where you have it stored in your inventory. So it pulls all that in for you, including the image, and then you just go in and input that data, the data that's sort of eBay doesn't know about, right? Or that's only in your head or only in one of your spreadsheets. You just have to put that into Flipwise, or we can import it into Flipwise automatically if you have an existing spreadsheet. You also asked about the pricing tiers. We do price based on store size. So if you're a new eBay seller and you have under 25 listings, Flipwise is free to use. Beyond the free plan, we do price based on store size. And we do that because the larger the store, the more expensive it is for us as operators of the platform to operate the platform. And so we sort of tier things up based on store size. And if you go to, if you just go to flipwise.app and you look at our pricing page, you can see kind of the different tiers there. You can see the 0 to 24 listings is free. Then between 25 and 99 listings is $10 a month. Between 100 and 500 listings is $20 a month, 500 to 1,000 is $29.99 a month, and just like that, it just kind of scales up like that. But you can see all that on the website, so check it out. But appreciate the questions. Thank you. Mr. Nugs asks, hey, Justin, loving the videos. When you're outsourcing, do you spend a lot of time in 1 or 2 thrift stores or go to many different stores, maybe only spending 15 minutes at each? I live in a fairly big city, St. Louis, which has many thrift stores. I tend to scan through the store quickly, and if I'm not having any luck, moving on to the next store. Is this a good strategy, or should I spend more time at less stores? Thanks. Sure, Mr. Nugs. I'm also from St. Louis, so I can give you a very particular answer here. I tend to spend more time than 15 minutes at a store. One is thrift stores in St. Louis are fairly spread out. There are certain ones that are nearby other ones, and so I tend to go to pockets of thrift stores on certain days. I'll go to 1, 2, or 3 that are kind of relatively close together. But I have the most success at thrift stores when I slow down, when I try to be curious, when I try to be open-minded, when I try to assume that there are good things out there for me to find. I just need to discover them. If I'm going into a thrift store and just like quickly pacing and scanning and just not finding anything and leaving, like I'm not really hunting. I'm not really searching for stuff. I'm seeing if anything grabs my attention. But some of the best things that you find, you have no idea what they actually are. And you have to do a bit of research and you have to be curious and figure it out. And so I would definitely recommend slowing down, spending more time at each thrift store, being curious, picking things up that you don't recognize, looking stuff up, checking out brands of clothing that you've never heard before. It's not only going to discover potentially profitable items, but it's also going to increase your knowledge of what has value and what doesn't. So I would definitely slow yourself down. Sometimes you just don't have enough time. And so, I drop my daughter off at piano practice every Tuesday, and I end up going to the same thrift store, and I only have about 10 minutes at this thrift store. So, I just don't have time to go deep during that. And sometimes I'm successful, other times I'm not, but I know that on those days, I'm definitely leaving stuff behind because I'm just not digging too deep. And so I would definitely recommend going to less stores and spending more time opening up your curiosity, treating it as like a learning experience. Your objective is to discover, not necessarily just pick out the stuff that is obvious. So that's what I would do. Good luck out there. John asks, I thought I recalled a video where you almost always offered free shipping and just built the cost of the shipping into the sales price. Yet I see that most everything you sold in this video has a shipping cost to the buyer. Have you had a change of heart about free shipping? Thanks, John. I haven't really had a change of heart about free shipping. I still do free shipping on a lot of items depending on what that item is, but I also experiment with a bunch of different strategies on eBay, including shipping strategies, and I would encourage you to do the same, not just for shipping, but for everything eBay related. Try not to get stuck in a rut of always doing things the exact same way, because you may find that those ways become outdated or that the market shifts, and you always really want to be experimenting with different strategies to see what works for you and your store in particular. In the past, I have done a lot more free shipping than I'm doing currently. Right now, I'd say I do about 25 to 30% free shipping and the rest paid shipping. And when I do paid shipping, I do a flat rate shipping. And so I just have some business policies predefined that have a range of flat shipping costs that I apply based on roughly what the item is going to cost to ship that I determine when I'm listing. But some items I think do benefit from having free shipping depending on the category. And I usually determine that when I'm doing my market research, when I'm listing. I'm looking at active listings, sold listings, and I'm seeing how other people price their items, including how they price the shipping. And you'll run across certain items in certain categories that have an overwhelming majority offering free shipping, and I like to be competitive and also offer free shipping. It also just depends on the item. Sometimes I know exactly how much something is going to cost to ship or a maximum amount that it's going to cost to ship, and it's easier for me to just build that into the price instead of a separate shipping cost. So it really just depends. There's a lot of variables that go into it, but I do a mix and I'm always changing it. If you hear me talking about something here on this channel and you see evidence of the contrary, typically that's me just testing different things. I like to always be testing things and trying different strategies and seeing what works and seeing which ones I need to get rid of and things like that. You also asked, I read that eBay has certain listing errors that will cause an item to never show up in search. Can you get that error defined by eBay so it can be corrected? It has happened to me a few times for items that have good sell-through, clear photos, and relentless editing to try to find the problem. 2 years, no views, scroll forever. Thanks for your uniquely no-spin presentation. So I don't know of any scenario where eBay's telling you specifically why something would not be showing up in search. Sometimes you get that notification that you need to put item specifics, which I think will probably help. So if eBay's telling you, hey, your listing is missing item specifics, adding those item specifics may help it in search than not having those item specifics in there. But eBay's not giving you any information about why your item might not be appearing in search. And you say here you have a few items that have a good sell-through, clear photos, over 2 years, not getting any views. Like something does not seem right there. You know, if the item does have a good sell-through rate, if you're looking it up and it has, and you know, lots of them are selling, but yours is getting absolutely no views at all, you know, that seems really weird. But if that was happening to me, I would just end that listing completely. I wouldn't even sell similar or relist, and I would just create an entirely new listing with all of the item details filled out to try to prevent that from happening again. That sounds like an anomaly, though. It sounds like a weird situation. Casper asks, question, I have an eBay store with around 1,000 items in one category. A couple months ago, I decided to start selling in other categories. The other items do not get any views, and I'm still waiting to get a sale from those other categories. Should I open a second store for the other categories? Thanks, Casper. It's a good question. Should you open a second store if you start to sell things that are outside of the niche of what you normally sell? You can definitely start a second store. You may have some more success doing that, but just because you're not getting any views or sales is not a reason alone to start a second store. Starting a second store is not going to magically make those items get views and get sales. The reason you may want to start a second store is if you want to build a loyal following around a particular niche and you want your account to be known in a community related to that niche so that people can follow your store and you'll get a lot of repeat customers. That's the reason you'd want to open up a secondary store that's focused around a single niche in particular. The way that eBay works is there's supply and demand that's very particular to the individual item. So everything you sell has a supply, it has a demand, it has a sell-through rate. What you'll want to do is check the sell-through rate, the supply and the demand of those items that you're considering putting in a second store to understand what the demand is and how popular it is, and set your expectations accordingly for how long it will take for those things to sell. Whether they're in one store or the other is really not going to impact that at all. It will impact it later if you get a big following around that second store. Then you might start generating sales in a way that you wouldn't running everything from a single store. But just switching it over to a second store is not going to make those things magically start to sell. Scott asks, how do I beat the 90-day ended listing deletions. I winter in Florida for 3 months. I was not aware after 90 days they get deleted. I lost 120 listings and had to start from scratch on all of them. I will be going away again for 100 days this winter. Could I bulk overprice and not get any sales? Could I go on vacation mode for 2 weeks, then end listings? What's your solution? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm guessing, you had a bunch of ended listings and those things expire. I'm actually not sure what that expiration time is, but it sounds right. I know drafts also expire as well after a certain amount of time. So I think your idea of giving everything a extremely high value so that you don't get any sales, that could work. It feels a little weird, but it definitely could work. And then the vacation mode option is an option as well. And I have heard of people doing this where they put their store on vacation mode, not allowing sales, but that only goes for 30 days. So I think what you'd need to do is, put it on your calendar that after 29 days, you're going to turn vacation mode off and then put it back on for another 30 days. I think that should work out for you. That's probably what I would do if I was in this situation. But if you have any ideas, let us know in the comments below. Eric asks, do you have any tips on staying motivated? I have a lot to list, but find it hard to always want to do it. Hey, Eric, thanks for the question. I get it, and you're not alone. Like most people, I hate listing too. It can be hard to find the motivation to list. But here's the thing though, you can't rely on motivation. If you limit your listing times to when you have motivation, you're not going to be very successful. Instead, you need to build discipline. Discipline is the ability to give yourself a command and follow it consistently, even when you don't really want to do it. There's a concept in psychotherapy, sometimes referred to as a paradigm, which basically means your default set of behaviors. You can think of it as like an internal thermostat. Like take the thermostat in your house, for example. You set it to 70 degrees and it keeps your house at 70 degrees. If somebody leaves the door open in the summer, the house is going to rise to like 80 degrees, and your thermostat notices this and kicks on and brings it back down to 70 degrees. Your paradigm or your thermostat when it comes to your eBay business is that you hate listing and you don't want to do it. You occasionally get the motivation to list, which is like occasionally leaving the door open in the summer, so you list a bunch, but then your thermostat kicks on and brings you back to your default behavior of hating to list and not doing it. And so you kind of swing back and forth between hating listing and not doing it, and then occasionally finding the motivation. This is all exhausting and produces inconsistent results. It's the same problem with dieting, by the way. Instead, you need to attack the issue at the root, which is your paradigm or your default set of behaviors. You weren't born hating to list stuff on eBay. It's a learned behavior that can be unlearned and changed in the same way that it was formed, which is by repetition. So to fix this, you need to set some listing goals and then stick with them. The days where you have motivation will be pretty easy, but they'll be rare, so you can't rely on them. When the motivation is not there, which will be most days, instead rely on discipline. The more you resist being lazy and instead do the things you need to do even though you don't really want to do them, the easier it gets. This is like reprogramming your thermostat to be at 80 degrees by default, or reprogramming your default behaviors to be lazy and instead be someone who consistently does what they need to do even when they don't want to do it. Now, you probably will never love to list stuff, but what you will love is your ability to be disciplined, and you'll especially love the results, which is more money. Marcia asks, so I work at a storage facility and get tons of free stuff. Instead of throwing it in the landfill, I put it on eBay at a little lower price and list pretty much everything. Do you think if it is free, you should list it, or should I still be picky about what is being listed? Hey, Marcia, that's a good question. So you're getting a bunch of free inventory. Should you just list it all, or should you be picky and only list the stuff that's going to bring in a decent amount of money or a certain amount of money? The way you want to think about that is by your time. Like you really want to think about how much your time is worth and put sort of a dollar amount on that time. Like figure out like, if I was doing something else, I could be making X amount of money. And so it takes time to sort through stuff and list it on eBay and ship it and pack it. And if you're only pulling in, $5 net return on something that took you an hour to go through a pile and list it on eBay and ship it, that probably wouldn't be worth it, although that wouldn't take an hour. But you get what I mean. Figure out how much your time is worth and figure out how much time it takes to actually find, list, and ship something, and then determine whether it's worth it for you to do it or not. I don't know what that number is. You're going to have to figure that out on your own. And that's sort of how I think about it. I think like, okay, when I'm listing stuff or when I'm sourcing, like, is this is going to take me roughly this amount of time? Is it worth it to make this much money? Sometimes I pick something up that I'm only going to make like a $10 net return on it, but I know it's going to be extremely quick to list because it's brand new in box, and maybe it's super easy to ship. All of those sort of factors I consider when I'm thinking about whether I'm going to buy something to list it on eBay and to resell it. And so whether it's free or not, it's good that you don't have to pay a cost of goods on that stuff, but there is a cost, and that's your time. So figure out how much your time is worth, figure out how much time it takes to go through the process of picking, listing, shipping, all that stuff, and just figure out whether that's worth it for you or not. Putting garbage up on eBay, it's just never going to sell, or it's going to take years to sell, and you have to pay the ongoing storage costs, all of that stuff. So that's what I would consider when answering that question. Osceola Coins and Currency asks, question, what is the fastest way to get followers? Well, that's a good question. I don't really know. So eBay does allow you to follow other sellers. I don't know. I've never tried to get followers. I have a ton of followers on eBay. I assume that's just because I have, this YouTube channel and I publicize my eBay account, and y'all are probably watching what I list and sell, making sure I'm not lying to you. But I don't really know how to get followers necessarily on eBay. I think the best way would be to just, be a good seller. That's probably the best way to get followers, is just list good items, list items things that people want, provide good customer service, ship on time, pack well, those types of things. Be known for someone who does a good job selling on eBay. That would be the best way, I think, to start to get followers. I think if you sell in a particular niche, like if you sell comic books, for example, and that's a good idea to build up as many followers as you can. That just suggests you're probably going to have a lot of repeat buyers. So short of starting a YouTube channel, I'm not really sure the best way to get followers besides just being a good seller. But I can't say I benefit from having a lot of followers. Every once in a while, one of my viewers will buy something from my eBay account, which I appreciate. Thank you. But it's very rare. And I don't want you to buy stuff. To be clear, I don't want you to buy stuff from my eBay account. You're welcome to if you see something that you like. But if my income on eBay was made up of a bunch of sales happening to viewers on this YouTube channel, that would not represent a realistic view of selling on eBay, because I get not all of y'all have YouTube channels, for example. So just to be clear, I rarely get viewers buying stuff on my eBay account, and I would prefer to keep it that way, because I want this channel to be a realistic view of selling on eBay and not inflated just because I have a YouTube channel. Buckman asks, hi Justin, thanks for the great content. You're welcome. With the option for buyers to see the reduced shipping cost, if a buyer pays more shipping that ends up being due, does the buyer receive the overage money back? Thank you. It's a good question. So when you sell something on eBay, you set a price that the buyer must pay to ship it. Sometimes you use calculated shipping. Sometimes you use a flat rate shipping. Sometimes you do free shipping and you build the cost of ship into the overall sale price. Whatever it is, you charge the buyer some amount to ship. And then when you go to actually ship the item when it sells, you are charged an amount to ship for the label. Those are often two different things. Sometimes there's a discrepancy between the two, especially if you don't use calculated shipping, where you charge the buyer $10 to ship and it tipped $12 to ship, so you lost out on $2 extra. Or you charge the buyer $10 to ship and it only costs you $8 to ship, and so you make $2 extra. In either of those cases, the buyer doesn't get reimbursed anything or any more money taken from them. And so that's up to you as the seller whether you want to reimburse the buyer for any shipping overages that they pay. But for me, I don't do it unless it's really crazy. If I accidentally put 25 pounds for some very small item and they still bought it at a calculated shipping rate that was way off of what it actually, I'll give some money back on that, because that's just not fair. But a few dollars here and there, discrepancies, they even out for me. So sometimes I make a little bit more, sometimes I make a little bit less. I don't use calculated shipping, I use flat shipping. So I don't give the buyer any money back when they pay a little bit more for shipping. And the reason that I don't is because when the buyer goes through the entire purchasing process, they're given a final price and they can decide, is this worth this price to get this item to me? And if they say yes, then it's worth it. Then they are saying that they're fine with that cost. It doesn't matter what it actually costs me to ship. But I know that there are some sellers out there who do reimburse the buyers for any overages that they pay, and you can do that if you want to, so it's really up to you. But eBay doesn't force it, eBay doesn't make you do it, and eBay's fine with you keeping some overages. Also something to consider here as well, the price you pay for a shipping label from eBay or Pirate Ship or wherever, Pirate Ship made money on that too, or eBay makes money on that label too, so you're not paying what it actually costs to ship. Pirate Ship or eBay is marking it up a few percentage points so that they can make money off of the label that you buy, and it's the same thing that you would be doing to the buyer here. You may be marking up your shipping costs a little bit more. There's nothing immoral about it. It's already happening to you every day as a purchaser of shipping labels on eBay or Pirate Ship or anywhere else. So it's no different for the end buyer either.
Hey Justin, really appreciate the content you've been providing, man. I love the more chill take on reselling videos. Very cool. Just had a question about disputes. I got an eBay payment dispute from somebody saying they didn't recognize the transaction. While not a large sum of money, it's less than $30. The pain of it, I don't understand. The person may have had their identity stolen, or just someone stole their credit card. I don't feel like that's my issue. That's an eBay issue. I don't know why eBay would hold my funds awaiting an outcome when they should just pay that anyway. Have you ever had this issue, or do you have any thoughts on the issue? Would appreciate any help. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. It is kind of annoying when you get a dispute from eBay. And so what that is when a buyer buys something and then some amount of time after they buy it, you get a notification saying they disputed the charge. And there's a couple of different ways that they can dispute it. They can say they don't recognize the charge, or they never received the item, or a couple other things. And it is, yeah, it does come back on you as the seller. But typically, in almost every scenario, you don't end up actually losing any money on the sale. And it does happen, I would say it happens to me once or twice a year at most, and it's usually not a big deal. And how you handle it depends on the actual dispute type. And so if the buyer is disputing it for, like they are saying that they don't recognize the charge, typically, eBay will hold the funds, and they will take care of it. And then some number of weeks or months later, they refund those funds back to you after it's all sorted. But there are scenarios where it could be the seller's fault for the dispute. And that's why eBay has to deal with you as the seller and not just take care of it themselves. And so, for example, the buyer can dispute a charge based on the fact that they are saying that they never received it. And in those scenarios, eBay will reach out to you and say, can you provide the tracking number? I don't know why they do that. Obviously, they have the tracking number, but they do ask you to provide it. So all you have to do is take the tracking number that eBay already has and provide it to them through their dispute interface. And then, typically if the tracking is valid and it shows that it was sent on time and delivered and all that, you don't have to worry about it. It's just taken care of. And so I've never lost money on a dispute. It is annoying because they hold your money for like I said, a couple weeks or a couple months, but I've always gotten that money back, and it's annoying, but it's just a part of doing business online. Patty asks, I promote most things. My thinking is instead of lowering the price, use the money that you were going to mark off for promotions instead. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. This way, I'm tickling the algorithm as well as reaching more people ideally and ideally gaining customers. My question is, if I promote something, if it doesn't sell and I remove it from my store, am I paying a price on that even if it didn't sell? So the short answer is no. If you use eBay's standard promotions, you only get charged the promotion fee if the item sells to a buyer that clicked on the promotion to buy it. So, even if you have promotions turned on and you sell the item, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be charged the promotional fee. You only get charged if the buyer clicked on your listing from an ad. But there is another type of eBay promotions, which they just changed the name of. I can't remember what it's called now. But basically, it's like a pay-per-click model. So you list something and you promote it, and every time somebody clicks on it, you get charged some small amount depending on a number of variables that you set as a part of that campaign. And then you don't get charged anything if and when it sells. Personally, I don't recommend that style of promotions to most people or to most items. There are situations where that promotional method does make sense, but if you're buying stuff at thrift stores and flea markets and garage sales and selling across all categories, you definitely don't want to use it for 99% of the things that you're selling. And you want to use the standard promotions where you promoted it like 2% or 3% or whatever. And then when it sells, if it sells to a buyer that has clicked on that promotion, then you get charged that additional 2 or 3%. So, but yeah, if you end it and take it out of your store, you're not going to be charged that promotion fee if it didn't sell. All right. Toggly asks, my question is about those multiple listing services like Vendu. Have you ever had any experience on them, either good or bad? It would seem to me if the idea of selling on eBay is to get as many eyeballs on your merchandise as you can, and cross-listing apps allow you the ease of only creating one main listing, which they disseminate, wouldn't it make sense to cross-list on all platforms simultaneously? I think they also offer some kind of feature that automatically delists items when it sells on one platform so you don't have multiple sales. Are there any downsides to cross-listing stuff? So yeah, cross-listing. I don't do a whole lot of cross-listing these days. I have experimented a lot with it in the past, but to me, the value of cross-listing, the money that I made from it, the additional sales that I made from it did not outweigh the hassle of managing cross-listing across many marketplaces. So there's a lot of tools out there that do it. Personally, I never really trusted the tools that I've tried. They were either very difficult to use, or they were doing weird things to my inventory and I couldn't tell what they were doing and it felt dangerous, like things were going to be deleted. I'm sure those platforms have improved over time. But again, like if I was making double the amount in sales or triple the amount in sales, I think I could stomach some of the challenges that come with cross listing, but it just wasn't worth the squeeze for me. I was not, eBay is so much of a larger platform. And this may have a lot to do with what I sell in particular, which is everything. But, if you're selling nothing but clothes, cross listing from eBay to Poshmark may make a ton of sense, right? But if you're selling in some other category, that it isn't very popular on other marketplaces, it may not make sense. And so again, take my advice with a grain of salt. You should experiment with cross-listing to see if it is worth it for you. It was never worth it for me. It was just not, it didn't generate enough income to deal with the hassle of doing it. And I think like when I finally gave it up, it was when one of the cross-listing platforms said that they delisted my item when they really didn't, and it sold twice. I was like, okay, this is not worth it. I made like an additional $80 this month by selling on other platforms. Now I got a ding on my account for having to cancel it. It was just not worth it. And so I moved on from it, but your mileage may vary. You may find that it is successful and you should do it. But personally, eBay is king, like it or not. That's where all the money is for the things that I sell. I have found more value on focusing on eBay specifically and growing my business there instead of, spreading it out to a bunch of smaller marketplaces. So that's my view on it, but give it a shot. Manausi asks, I've heard you say to go ahead and list out of season items. Does that mean that eBay will put you back at the top of search as a new listing every month as they renew the item? I don't want to be in no man's land when the best season also rolls around. So yeah, things sell year round. So seasonal specific items do sell year round. They sell more frequently during their season, but they do sell year round. So if you're wondering whether you should list something that's seasonal or a holiday related thing outside of those seasons, my recommendation is to not wait and just list it right away, because it can't sell if it's not listed. And while there's a lower chance that it will sell out of season, there's still a good chance that it will sell out of season. If you don't mind hanging on to it until the season comes around, I do recommend that you price it at the height of the season and don't price it in the out of season pricing. You can do that by checking Terapeak, or they call it product research now. Just go back. If you're selling a Christmas item in the middle of the summer, go back through Terapeak and see what it sold for during Christmas time and price it at that. But your question was like, does that mean that eBay will put you back to the top of search as a new listing every month as they renew the item? No, I don't think it does. eBay does automatically renew your listing every month like that, but it does not give it a new eBay item ID when it does that, and I do not think it treats it as a new listing. So you would want to end and relist once it gets back into season if you want that to be freshened up in search. SDVLT asks, can you please break down the seller summary, please? I cannot understand the actual profit I make on an item, and all the insights in general confuse me, especially as payment is affected after delivery. Thank you. Sure, I'm not sure what you mean by seller summary, if you mean something specific there, but I'm going to take this question to mean like, how do I know how much money I'm making on my items that I sell? And it can be a little bit confusing, but I'll break it down and make it super easy to figure out. So first of all, when you sell something on eBay, you sell it for a total amount, a total sales amount. That includes how much you actually sold the item for, let's say $100, and how much the buyer paid in shipping. And so if you had $15 in shipping on top of that, then the buyer paid $115 for that sale. You made a gross amount of $115. Now you have to start subtracting your expenses from that. You have platform fees. So you have to pay a certain percentage back to eBay for using their platform. That's going to lower that net return by a little bit. Then you also have to pay to ship the item. And so you got $15 in shipping, but you have to go and ship the item as well. And so it doesn't really matter how much the buyer actually paid for shipping. You have to ship the item. And if you end up shipping it for a little bit less than what they paid, well, you made a little bit more money on it. If you ship it for a little bit more than what they paid, well, then you lost a little bit more money on that. But either way, you have a total gross amount that includes the sale price plus the shipping paid by the buyer. Then you get that money, and then you get your fees taken out of it, and then you get your actual cost to ship that you paid as a seller taken out of that. And that's going to give you, first of all, like your first look at your net is that after all fees and shipping costs, you've made, let's say, $90. And then you have to, subtract the last of your net return, which is typically your cost of goods, how much you paid to purchase the item. So let's say you paid $50 to purchase the item. Well, if your net return is down to 90 after fees and shipping, then take out your COGS and you're left with $40 in net profit. So it's pretty much that easy. And if you look at one of your orders on eBay, I just pulled one up right here. It's going to tell you right here, it's going to say what your buyer paid, $11.65. They also paid $6.99 in shipping. Then they also paid $1.82 in sales tax. Now that's where it gets a little bit confusing because your order total here is $20.46, but you didn't actually make $20.46 on that because eBay collects the sales tax from the buyer and remits it out to the state. So that never hits your balance at all. So what you really made was $20.46 minus $1.82. And then you have this other box here that says what you earned. And so you had an order total of $20.46. You minus out that $1.82 from sales tax, like I just said. Then you minus out your selling costs. This is your shipping label, what you paid to ship it, and the transaction fees, $2.67. That's the platform fees that eBay charges you for using their platform. And you're left with a total of $10.90 in your order earnings. That does not include your cost of goods because eBay doesn't know how much you paid for something. If I look at this exact same item on Flipwise, we'll take a look here. You're going to see this same thing. You're going to see this $11.65 plus $6.99 in shipping was a total of $18.64. Flipwise does not consider sales tax because, again, eBay collects it and remits it for you. It never touches your balance, so we just sort of ignore it in Flipwise. And then we break down all of your fees. So your final value fee of 40 cents, that's fixed. Your final value fee of $2.27, which is a percentage. And then that $5.07 cost of goods brings you down to $10.40 as a net return on this order in particular. But what that doesn't include is the cost of goods over here, because your cost of goods is 50 cents on this one. I paid 50 cents for this PlayStation controller. So at the end of the day, my net return on this was $10.40. That's the order total minus all fees minus my cost of goods. So hopefully that makes sense. Second Chance Threads asks, hey Justin, I've been debating whether to offer free returns, but I sell mostly clothes. Do you think your return rate is 3% because of the category you sell will have less returns? I guess I'm afraid of selling an item for $15, it gets returned, so possible profit of relisting that item might be $8. If that item gets returned again, it becomes more hassle than it's worth. Thoughts? Yeah, so I do typically hover right around the 3% range for returns, which I think is pretty good. Like a standard brick and mortar or Amazon, I think they're in like the 10 to 12% rates for returns. And so a 3% return rate I'm very happy with, and I think it's totally fine. I sell across all categories though. So what was your question? You said, do you think your return rate is 3% because of the category you sell will have less returns? I don't think so. 40% of my inventory is clothing in particular, which I think has higher returns than most. Another big chunk of my category is electronics and even vintage electronics, which is also prone to more returns. So I would say my store is generally a higher potential for returns than some other stores because I deal with clothing and electronics. So maybe what I sell does influence that a little bit. But yeah, y'all have heard me talk about returns on this channel. I just don't worry about them at all. I have a free return policy, a no questions asked return policy that I implemented because I just don't want to worry about it. I found myself getting anxious about returns in the past, and now I just don't care. If somebody wants to send the item back and I get it back in the condition that it was sent, I'll refund their money and I'll relist it. And more often than not, I just don't lose money on returns. I make less than I would have if it hadn't have been returned, but I don't lose money on it. And so I just consider it a part of doing business. I figure I'm going to get between 3 and 5% of my stuff returned. Typically, it hovers around 3%, and I don't sweat it. I don't think it's a hassle. I don't worry about it. I think it's definitely a good thing to offer returns on eBay because buyers can return things even when you don't offer returns. I think it's good also to offer free returns. I think it's an enticing thing, and it just doesn't cost me a whole lot of money, but I think it adds a lot of value to my listings and might make a buyer choose mine over another's. So Freddie asks, just wondering, Justin, why do you go out of the way to say your ROI? It should just be dollars and cents. I may only make 30% ROI on something I paid $30 and sold for $100, but I made more than a ROI selling something for 25 cents that I sold for $8. What gives? Yeah, Freddie, you're right. ROI is sort of a fun vanity metric. I do like including it. I do like talking about it. It's really fun to know that you took $1 and turned it into $100 and you got just an excellent ROI. But it's not a good indicator of the success of your business on its own. It's because what you said is very true. You can have an extremely high ROI, but a very low net return, or you can have a very low ROI and extremely high net return return. And at the end of the day, we're trying to make money here. So ROI on its own, not super helpful, but it is fun. And I like to talk about it. I like to include it. I think a lot of metrics are important. And what is good too is understanding trends. And so I know that my average ROI is usually right around 600%. And so if I look at a week and I'm at 300%, like what's going on here? Why is my ROI lower? And I'll look like, oh yeah, it's because I've been spending more money on inventory. I spent, my cost of goods has increased. And so it allows you to sort of pick out trends and discrepancies in those trends when you're tracking all sorts of metrics and seeing how they pace over time. So, but yeah, ROI on its own, not super helpful, just kind of fun. Melissa asks, if you have multiples of the same item that are exactly the same, I understand that I can list them as multiples to give the buyer the option of buying more than one. My question is, does this cheapen the item? Meaning, if the buyer sees that I have more than one item, it's not that unique, and the buyer may not want to pay the price I have given the item. I deal more in ephemera and paper items that are more unique. I've been selling these items that I have multiples of one at a time after it sells and is delivered. I will list the next one. I'm rethinking this concept and would love to hear your thoughts on this. Thanks, Melissa. This is a really good question. I don't think I've addressed this on the channel before, but what you're asking is like, should I have multiple quantities of something? Should I list them all as one listing with multiple units, or should I list them individually? And there's pros and cons of each. If you're selling a rare or unique item, you definitely want to be careful with how you do this. Here's the way that I think about it. If this is a very popular or in demand or not that rare or unique item, it's much easier to just make one listing with multiple quantities. Some say that eBay does favor listings that have multiple quantities. I don't really know for sure. I haven't seen any evidence of that, or I don't have any anecdotes that shows that that's the case. But what I have noticed though is if I'm listing a multi-quantity item, sometimes it takes a while to get a sale, but once I get a sale, then that listing feels like it's more prominent, or it's somehow getting more sales. And so sometimes that first sale on a multi-unit listing can be the hardest to get, but after you get one. So sometimes what I do is we'll lower the price and make that first buyer get a pretty good deal just to get that first sale, and then I'll raise it back up after I get that first sale. But if you do have a rare or unique item, you may not want to list them as a multi-quantity listing for a couple of reasons. The first one is for perceived rarity. And so if you are listing something that is rare or unique, but you're listing 20 copies of it, that sort of sends the wrong signal to the potential buyer that it's not all that rare. And so that's probably the biggest reason why you would want to list them one at a time like you are. The second reason why you may want to list it in that style one at a time is for market testing, market price testing. So you can list it at like $20, and if it sells super quickly, you might want to raise the price because it sold so quickly. And so by listing one at a time, it allows you to change the pricing based on the demand. But I would definitely hesitate listing all of your rare or unique items as a multi-quantity listing. You want to preserve the idea of rarity with that. User asks, has anyone here been able to set up their own website or hire someone to do it? I need a site that can handle online sales. I'm really fed up with the high fees on eBay. The stuff I resell doesn't really need eBay's extra visibility. Thanks for the question. It's a good one. It comes up quite a bit. You hear a lot of people talking about eBay fees and how high they are and getting frustrated with that. So if you're thinking about leaving eBay and setting up your own website to sell your inventory directly to users, you definitely can do that. But I want to talk a little bit about the reality of being able to do that and maybe paint a slightly different picture for you about eBay's fees. Building a website is super easy, especially these days. There are tons of different services out there that you can get a website up and running and get your inventory migrated over into it without writing any code at all. Shopify is a good example. Wix, there's tons of them out there, literally hundreds of website builders out there. So building the website is actually the easy part. The difficult part is marketing it. Just because you build a website doesn't mean people are automatically going to find that website. And that is the most difficult part about selling online outside of eBay or some of the other bigger platforms, is how do you get eyeballs on that website and on your inventory? You have to market it, and marketing is a skill, and it's a difficult thing to do. It also costs a lot of money. It's not free to market things. You have to spend tons of money to actually get your website out there in front of users. With eBay, it does feel like the fees can be pretty high, but the biggest thing you get from eBay is access to their audience. They have upwards of like 130 to 150 million buyers on the platform every single year. If you were going to to try to get even a very, very small fraction of that size of audience coming to your own personal website, it would cost way more than what you're paying in eBay fees for marketing to get that many people to show up to your website. And so it pales in comparison. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is very, very, very difficult to market your website in a way that consistently brings buyers to your website in a way that can even come close to competing with eBay. And so that's really what your fees are paying for the most part, are access to that audience. And so when you think about the costs that come with trying to market a website to get even a fraction of the audience size that eBay has, 12 to 15% in eBay fees start to seem pretty good, actually, because you would just spend way more than that. And then even if you are selling direct to consumer on your own website, you still have to deal with fees because credit card payments aren't free. You have to pay, as a vendor, you have to pay the credit card companies a fee for using their services. Some of the big credit card payment processing platforms like Stripe make it easy to accept payments, but that comes at a fee. And the minimum you're going to pay to accept online payments through a credit card, for example, is 3%. So that knocks the 12 to 15% on eBay down to about 9%. So right out of the gate, even if you're selling on your own platform, it's going to cost you at least 3% in fees. Another consideration is something like sales tax. You don't really think about that a whole lot, especially when you're selling on eBay, because they actually handle all of it. But sales tax is extremely complicated if you're trying to handle that on your own. Every single state in the US, every single international region, all have different rules on sales tax and different percentages on sales tax, and it's really hard to keep up with all of that. eBay does that all for you. They make sure that the buyer is charged sales tax if they need to be, and they remit that sales tax out to the state on your behalf. It's actually a pretty nice service that they offer that, because if you're responsible for that, and you would be if you're running your own website, you have to know the tax situation in all 50 states. As soon as you get a customer in one of those 50 states, you have to make sure you're charging them the appropriate sales tax amount. You got to keep that sales tax, then you have to send it off to the state on a quarterly or yearly basis. And you have to do that for all 50 states. It's just a huge time sink. And I know this because my other business, Flipwise, we have to deal with sales tax as well. And it's so complicated, in fact, that we just pay a company to do it for us. And we pay that company almost $500 a month just to handle sales tax for us and remit it out to the appropriate states and international places. It's so complicated. So that's another thing you have to think about. So is it impossible to build a website and put your inventory up there and get people to come and buy it? No, definitely not impossible. I don't want to discourage you from doing it, but I want to paint a realistic picture of what it will actually take. And that is a lot of marketing skills, a ton of money to market it in a continuous basis. And those marketing costs are very likely going to cost way more than what you pay in eBay fees. You're going to have to figure out sales tax and be remitting that to all these states. It's a huge pain. That's why I think eBay is such a good platform, even with the fees. There's just nowhere else you can get access to an audience of that size for that little money. Randman asks, "Hey Justin, love the channel. Thanks. I have two questions. Does offering free returns make more buyers return items? And number two, I've been reselling since 2021 with about 750 items sold. I don't have a store or anything like that, but I have not been writing down my sales since then. How do I go back and see all my listings from the very beginning so I can start keeping a spreadsheet, or am I toast in a sense? Thanks for your time." So yeah, I'll answer those questions. The first one, does offering free returns make more buyers return items? I don't think so. It's hard for me to say. I've offered free returns for so long. I don't remember what my return rate was before it. But if you look now, I offer free returns and my return rate always hovers right around 3%, which I'm happy with. I think that's pretty good. I just don't get a whole lot of returns, and I offer free returns on everything. The thing you want to keep in mind is buyers generally want to keep the products that they are sold. They don't want to return them. Returning them is a hassle. And so that's what I keep in mind. Obviously, if there's something wrong with the product, if it didn't fit, or if it didn't work, or it was broken in transit or whatever, that buyers need an option to return it, and offering free returns, I think, helps me stand out from other sellers who don't offer free returns. So I think the benefits outweigh the negatives. Obviously, there are bad buyers out there who are going to try to scam you and things like that. I'm not considering that. I just don't get that a whole lot, and I don't think it's a major problem. For me, I build those sort of inevitabilities into my business. I expect them to happen, and when they do happen, I don't get bent out of shape, because my business is larger than just one sale, and if I got discouraged because one buyer returned something or one buyer tried to scam me, I would be ignoring the thousands of other buyers who are completely fine and I make a lot of money off of. And so for me, free returns is definitely worth it. I don't think it really increases the amount of returns that you get, as long as you're describing your items well and selling good, high quality inventory, because buyers want to keep the items. They're buying them for a reason. They don't want to buy them just to return them for fun. So I wouldn't worry about that. Oh, you also had a second question. How do I go back and see my listings from the very beginning? So I think, eBay does have some reports. You can go in and look at your historical reports, and I think it'll, you can export some CSV, some spreadsheet files that has reports going back many, many years. So you should be fine. You should be able to get at that data as well. When you sign up for Flipwise, we ingest the last 2 years of sales data, which is what the limit, that's what the maximum that eBay allows us to do. So that's another option. You could sign up for Flipwise and we would ingest all of your orders going back 2 years, and then you could apply your acquisition data, your cost, and other data to those orders if you're trying to catch up. So that's another option. JC asks, I'm curious, if you scan an item and determine it sells, what is the minimum potential profit do you hope to see before making the purchase? Thanks, JC. I don't really think of it in that way. There's a lot of variables that go into just determining whether something is worth it to buy it to resell, and the amount of money that I'll make on it is only one of those factors. Obviously, it's a very important factor, and I'm not going to buy something to resell if I'm not going to make any money on it, or if the money I make on it is so low that it's not worth the effort. But that's just one factor. There's all sorts of other factors that go into that decision-making process. Another big one is something like time to sell. So if I'm looking at something that I think is going to take a week to sell, and I'll make 20 bucks on it, like that's a pretty quick sell, a pretty quick way to turn around $20. But if it takes 3 months to sell, I might be less willing to do it. And so in the reverse too, like if something is going to bring in $500, but it's going to take 6 months to sell, I might be more willing to sit on that for that long. And so time to sell is another big factor in determining whether I want to buy something to resell or not. Other smaller factors are things like, is it in a category that's prone to returns or scams? So like a lot of new high dollar electronics, I will pass on even if I'm going to make a lot of money on it, because I don't want to deal with the crowd that comes with selling a thing like that. Another thing is a hassle to ship. And so if something is extremely delicate and is going to have the potential of breaking en route, or it's going to take me a long time, I have to find a specialty box. I don't know, all sorts of things like that. I will, the amount of money that I need to make will increase for me to make the decision, the more difficult it is to actually ship the item. So a lot of different factors go into it. It's not as easy as saying I need to make this much money. And so I think when you do this for enough time, you start to sort of develop your own rubric for that. So that's mine. King of Stevomania asks, why is it when you accept an offer from a buyer, payment is not immediately made? I've accepted offers and sometimes have to wait 4 days before being able to cancel due to buyer not paying. Yeah, Stevomania, that's one of the downsides of both auctions and best offers is sometimes buyers will send a best offer and you're like, cool, I'll take that. And you accept the best offer and they just never pay. And then you have to cancel it and get relisted and you have to wait a couple days. Super annoying. And it's one of the reasons why I don't turn best offers on my listings is just because of that hassle. eBay has been testing immediate payment for best offers, where in order for a buyer to make a best offer, they have to have their credit card information and agree to pay it. I don't understand their rollout strategy. I have not seen that in a long time. In the offers that I've received over the last month or two, none of them have been immediate payment, whereas a few months ago, some of them would have been immediate payment. My guess is that buyers are not accustomed to this and they're complaining about it, because when I would get immediate payment best offers from people, I would say 3 or 4 times over the course of a month, buyers would send me an angry email saying, I never agreed to pay for this. Why did you charge me? And I was like, what are you even talking about? You bought this thing. But then I realized oh no, they sent an offer and I accepted it and it immediately charged them. That was different from what the buyer was expecting, because they weren't expecting to have to pay in that way. And so I don't know what's going on with eBay with this. I don't know if they're still trying to roll this out more widely, or if they're going back to the drawing board to make it more clear to the buyer what's going on. But it's annoying. No way to prevent it except not allowing best offers. Phoenix Sales says, I completely agree with you about creating discipline over relying on motivation when it comes to listing. However, there are products and categories that I look forward to listing, like vintage electronics and hats. Do you have any products or categories you enjoy listing? And do you have any that you loathe? For me, it's clothes, specifically shirts. By the way, he has a great YouTube channel. You should check it out. I'll link it down below. There's certain things that I definitely enjoy listing more than others. I actually don't mind clothing at all. Clothing is one of my favorite categories to buy and sell in. So I don't really mind listing clothing that much. My absolute favorite thing to list, though, are brand new in the box things because you have to do nothing to prep them. You don't have to clean them. All you got to do is do the research list and take pictures. And it's really nice to be able to bang out many listings of new in-box products. So that's at the top of my list, is anything that's brand new. Valerie asks, I remember you basically saying less is more as to messaging buyers. Are you at all concerned about eBay rating you poorly on the percentage of your sales conversion rate or sales conversation rate? Hi, Valerie. Not really concerned about that at all. I have heard this concept before where eBay may judge you based on your conversation rate or your reply rate and somehow score that and impact the visibility of your items in search. I don't really buy into that. I don't think that's a thing. I think that's an old wives' tale. That's the thing about the eBay algorithm. They don't publicize how it works, which is a good thing. If they did publicize how it works, then it would be easier to game and you would be at a disadvantage to others who have learned how the algorithm works. So it's a closely guarded secret, kind of how they determine search ranking and order. So it could be, it could be that they consider whether you reply to messages or not as a factor. I don't think it is, just because I don't really do it very often and it doesn't appear to impact my business in any way. No one knows for sure. Anytime you hear people talking about the algorithm, they're just taking a guess, including me. When I say I don't think it matters or it does matter, I'm taking a guess. I don't know. Nobody really knows but eBay. But my hunch is that it just doesn't matter whether you're replying to conversations or not. So, Story Behind It asks, is it possible to get a refund for a shipping label if it hasn't been taken to the post office and scanned yet? I had already packaged up an item that had the same buyer come back and buy something else a few hours later. How to best handle that situation? Yeah, absolutely. Good question. You can definitely cancel shipping labels and get a refund on those. And you do that from the Seller Hub. I can't remember exactly where it is, so I'm going to have to look it up here. But if you open up your Seller Hub, I think on the top it's under orders and then shipping labels. And then you'll find the order where you want to cancel the shipping label. And you, under the action menu, you put cancel label. Once you go through that cancellation process, it usually takes sometimes upwards of a week for eBay to officially cancel it and then refund the money. But that's what'll happen. So you just cancel it, then buy another one, and then wait a week for the original to be refunded. Rico asks, hey, Justin, thanks for all the info. You're welcome. I have a question. In listing Sell One Like This, is it okay to use any pics of the item that is already listed? Specifically, a nice pic where the lister illustrated the dimensions of the item, or am I just being lazy? Thanks. Hey, Rico, I don't think you're being lazy necessarily, but it is against policy to use other sellers' photos on eBay. As a seller yourself, when you upload photos to eBay, you give them the rights to use it however they wish. But as a seller, you can't just use anyone's photos without permission. So technically, I think their documentation says you have to reach out to sellers and ask their permission. So you could do that. You could send the buyer a message and say, hey, I really like this. Do you mind if I use it in your listing? And if they give you approval, then you can technically use it. So that's what I would recommend. So if you want to use someone else's photos, reach out to them first. That's the nice thing to do. They put the time and effort into making it. So if you want to benefit from that, just ask them first and see what they say. Tammy asks, okay, Justin, this is a new one for me and I need your advice. A buyer asked me to delay shipping because she's on vacation. Do I ask her to call her post office and ask them to hold the package and ship on time so I don't get a ding on my seller status? Or do I just send it out when she requested and then call customer service after the ding shows up on my account and work with them to get it removed? She did message me through eBay, so I have proof that she asked. Thanks in advance for your help. Hey, Tammy, that's a great question. You definitely run into this fairly regularly selling on eBay. Is you'll get a message saying like, hey, wait, don't ship it because I'm not going to be there or whatever. And here's what I do. I always send a message back that I say, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to delay shipping. I'm required to ship it by this date. So I'm happy to cancel your order, but if I don't hear back from you by this time, pick a time right before you need to ship it, then I'm going to go ahead and ship it. And typically people will either then cancel the order or they'll say, oh, that's fine or whatever. But I just, eBay requires you to ship on time. You do get a ding on your account if you don't ship on time. I don't think it's worth the hassle of going through the effort of getting that ding removed, or I don't even know if they will remove it. I'm not really sure, but I just send the buyer that message and it usually ends up just fine. Usually they're just like, oh, okay, it's fine. But yeah, it's really on the burden of the buyer to, if they're not going to be at their house to receive mail, like they need to hold their mail. The burden's on them. All right, let's jump into the top 10 sales of the week. I'll be answering other viewer questions sprinkled throughout the top 10 sales, so stick around if you want to see those. I'll leave time codes in the description below, so if you want to jump around to different questions, you can do that. And if you have any questions for me, leave them in the comment section below, and I will answer them in a future video. You Know It Mang asks, are the very cheap items you sell reduced price items to get them sold? What is your strategy with the very inexpensive items? I list some things for pretty cheaply, usually things I got for free, but I feel like I'm wasting my time and energy to get rid of them when I could probably spend the time on higher value items. Thanks. I think you're absolutely right. You definitely need to be asking yourself those exact questions. Even if you got an item for free, is it worth the time that it's going to take me to list something and ship it later? You may be referring to my last This Week in Flips video where I talked about a small board game piece for a Pokemon board game from the 90s. I think I made like $2.10 on it. And in that case, I actually didn't reduce the price at all. That was listed at that low price. And here was my thinking there, is that I had this board game with probably 50 individual pieces in it that could all be sold individually, but all of them were going to sell for in between probably $6 and $20, meaning I'm going to net anywhere from $2 to probably $13 or $14 per piece. Now, buying one item and listing it to get $2, a $2 return on it is probably not a good idea. It probably takes me more energy to actually research the item, list it, and then pack it up later when it sells. That making $2 from it is probably not worth it. But I had 50 pieces and I sat down in about an hour and listed all of those 50 pieces. So if you have things that are very similar to one another, it makes the listing process very quick. So if I list 50 individual pieces in an hour and each of them have a net return of $2, that's $100 right there. But even so, like many of these pieces were worth more than a net return of $2. And so I knew that I was going to make a couple $100 off of this board game by breaking it up into separate pieces. And if I'm sitting down to do some of them, might as well spend the extra time and do all of them. It's going to add up in the end. So that was my thinking then. But I definitely wouldn't have sourced that thing individually and listed it individually. It just would not make sense. Andy asks, "Hey Justin, thank you for all your helpful advice. It's really helped me grow my business. Can you say hi to my wife, Chloe?" No, I can't say hi to your wife, Chloe. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do it. You come onto my channel, you ask all these demands of me. I'm not going to do it. Hi, Chloe. A while back, you mentioned you pay your shipping fees with a credit card to gain bonuses. I can't seem to do the same. Whenever I pay via PayPal, it deducts from my PayPal balance or my bank account. Can you walk us through how to change this? Thank you again. Sure, Andy. So what Andy's referring to is on eBay, you can select two different payment methods to buy your labels through eBay. You can select to have the label costs come out of your eBay funds, out of your managed payment eBay funds, or you can select to have it come out of a linked PayPal account. Some people like to link their PayPal account for labels so that they can use a credit card and get mileage and bonuses through that. So definitely a cool thing if you can do that. But what you have to do is you have to go and set your default payment option to be your credit card. I think by default, PayPal is going to use your balance. And if your balance is nothing, then it's going to go to like a linked bank account. So you need to link your credit card and then set your credit card as your default payment method. And then any labels you buy through eBay will come through PayPal and get charged to that credit card directly. So give that a shot. Brad asks, "Thanks for the videos. I always learn a lot." You're welcome. How much time and effort do you put into cleaning your inventory? Is it worth cleaning it up to like new condition or just a quick once over to remove the label adhesives and any major dirty areas? Suggested cleaners, thanks. So one thing I do in terms of cleaning products is I tend to not source inventory that requires excessive cleaning. And so that's one thing you want to keep in mind when you're out there sourcing is not only is it worth buying to resell? Is it cheap enough to get a good return? Does it have a good sell-through rate? Is the supply and demand good? Is the sale price, average market sale price good? You also want to be thinking about other factors like cleaning. Is it going to require an hour of work for me to get this into sellable condition? I will often pass on an item if that's the case. But if the item is worth a lot of money, some cleaning is okay. But I keep that in mind as I'm outsourcing for new inventory. Similarly, you also want to be thinking about complexity of packing and shipping. And so there's definitely things that I've turned down because the net return that I would be getting does not justify the amount of effort that it would take to properly package and ship the item, or require a specialty box or all sorts of things. I don't want to discourage you from picking up items that can be more difficult to ship. I just want you to think of those other factors like shipping complexity and cleaning time as another condition of whether you're going to buy something or not. And make sure that what you're buying, if it does require a specialty box or if it does require a lot of extra cleaning, that it's worth more money, because that time that you're going to spend doing that stuff is worth money as well. But I definitely buy items that do require some amount of cleaning. Obviously remove stickers from everything. I use a tool called Scotty Peelers. I'll link them down below. I also keep around, just some diluted vinegar with water. That's my general cleaner. And I have some shop towels that I use. I like to use Mr. Clean erasers and iso alcohol as well. So all these little tools around there kind of help me make sure that everything I buy is in presentable condition. You know, shoes are another good example that sometimes they do require quite a bit of cleaning. I will not buy shoes that are heavily soiled and require a ton of cleaning unless the return is going to be pretty high. That's going to justify the extra time that it would take for me to invest into cleaning. Rose asks, hi Justin, question. I frequently receive lowball offers for my items. While I want to sell my inventory and avoid sitting on it, I also don't want to accept offers that are too low and end up losing money. Do you have any guidelines for evaluating offers, such as rejecting those that are more than 20% off listing price? Or should I be more open to accepting all offers? Thanks. Hey Rose, that's a good question. I typically don't have best offers turned on, though I have been experimenting more with that lately, and I'll have a different video on that in the future. But it's really just up to you. You need to understand sort of what you have into the item that you're getting a best offer on and whether that's worth it to sell. And so all sorts of variables go into decision making when whether or not you want to accept an offer. So if, for example, I'm willing to accept a much lower offer if the item's been listed for a longer amount of time, if the sell-through rate is lower, for example. But if I just list something and I get an offer, you know, for 20% off and I think it's going to sell at full price, well, I probably wouldn't have best offers turned on in the first place, but you get what I mean. You just want to make sure that you're not accepting a lower offer if you think that you can get more. And so for me, there's no like hard percentage. Like I don't think in my head, like, oh, it has to be at least, you know, less than 20% off. It just, sometimes I'll take more. It just really depends on the item, depends on the amount of money, depends on what else I've sold that day. If I feel like I really want to make a sale, I might be willing to take a lower offer. So it really just depends. No hard and fast rule.
Hi there. Thanks so much for all your videos. You're the only eBay seller that I really feel confident asking questions to.
Thank you.
So this is a little odd one. We got a purchase on a flip phone that we listed, and there was some weird correspondence from one person, and then the phone sold to, I think, another person, but that person immediately sent me a message saying, oh, I can't wait. You made my day. I can't wait to get the phone. I responded, glad I made your day. Hope you enjoy it. Blah, blah, blah. Sent off the phone. They messaged me immediately saying that they need a code for the phone. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because that's not how it was. But I just said, that's odd. There doesn't require a code. But I didn't have a SIM card. And then that person said, well, it's because you didn't have a SIM card. And when you put the SIM card in there, it asked for a code. But no worries, I got it cleared. I said, okay, I guess that makes sense. Happy that you got it cleared. End of story. And then we got an email later saying that that person disputed a charge with their institution to get money, saying they didn't recognize the charge. And eBay is going to let us know what the outcome is. Have you ever had anything like that? Because it all kind of sounds shady right from the get-go.
Yeah, that does sound shady. Appreciate you sending along the question. That's an interesting one. I think those two weird things happening are probably not connected in any sort of meaningful way. It sounds like you had a buyer who had some weird questions after they bought them. Maybe they had some trouble with the phone, or they were, I don't know, something sounds weird about that initial sale. I think your instincts to think something is kind of up there when they were asking them those questions are correct. But what they did later was open up a dispute with their credit card. This is just another way that certain buyers try to get money back after they've purchased something on eBay. The most common way is that they reach out and say there's a problem. Like, for example, I sort of expected your story to go like, oh, then they couldn't get the SIM card to work, and so they're asking for some partial refund. That's a very common tactic for a buyer to get money back after a sale. But in this case, it sounds like the buyer just went straight to their credit card and said, oh, I don't recognize this charge. Now, of course, there's a chance that this buyer is genuine and they actually did not recognize the charge. I don't really think that that's the case necessarily, but what will happen is eBay will handle this dispute for you. And most likely eBay will side with you because you sent the item on time, you have tracking against it, it shows as delivered, and that's the evidence that eBay needs in order to proceed with the case against the credit card company. Now, they'll put your money on hold. eBay will hold your funds from the sale, which kind of sucks because it can take many months for this to get resolved. But if eBay asks you to submit any information like a tracking number, even if they already have the tracking number, go ahead and submit it again and just wait. This happens to me about once every year or so, and I've never lost money in this situation. They've held my money for a long time, but I've never actually lost money in a situation when it comes to a dispute like this. So as long as you actually ship the item and as long as it shows delivered, that's usually the evidence that eBay needs in order to side with you. So you should be good to go. Nothing to worry about here. You should be just fine. Appreciate the question, Nikki. Thank you.
Hey Justin, Jason again. So I have been reselling since about February or so, and I am headed into my first Q4. And I've heard rumors that Q4 is a very, very exciting time to be a reseller. So 2 questions. Number 1, what should I expect for Q4? And what can I be doing now in late August and September to have a successful Q4? Thanks very much. Bye.
Yeah, appreciate it, Jason. Thanks for sending another question along. By the way, if you want to send along a video question like this, you can do so. There's a link in the description below. Love to have you on the channel. But to answer your question, Jason, yeah, Q4 is right around the corner. And typically Q4 is a time of higher sales on eBay and just in e-commerce in general. That's because of the holiday season. More people are buying stuff. They're buying gifts. Have more money on hand. More people are just buying in Q4. And so generally you can expect that sales are going to increase in Q4. So it is a pretty exciting time. You know, eBay just definitely is a more busy place. It really, though, depends on what you sell. And so personally, I'm an everything seller. I'll sell anything that is valuable, that can make money. But if you sell in a very particular niche, for example, it could be that Q4 is not a popular time. And so I just say that up front. For everyone listening to this answer, consider your own store. You may just be selling things that are different, and my advice doesn't apply to. So take it with a grain of salt. But as an everything seller, I can look over my data in the past, and typically my sales in Q4 are 20 to 30% higher than other quarters throughout the year. And so to prepare, you can just expect to have to do more, right? You're going to have to do more shipping, make sure you have enough supplies on hand. And so it's a good time to reorder boxes if you need to, reorder tape, make sure that your postal scale is in good working order. Make sure if you're thinking about getting a label printer, this is probably a good time to get a label printer just because you're going to be selling more and using it more. So that would be a good idea. And also just, this is the time to get all of your inventory live, right? You always want to be getting your inventory listed and live on eBay, but especially as we get closer to and into Q4, just because people are buying more stuff and you can't sell things if they're not listed on eBay. Trying to list as consistently as I possibly can, and just know I want to take advantage of the fact that there's more people on eBay. There's more buyers on eBay, so I want to get as much stuff live, and I want to be prepared for more sales, because my sales are going to increase by about 20 to 30% like they have historically. So that's what you can expect. Nothing crazy, just do more of the same stuff. I recently picked up 2 items that are new in box and appear to be factory sealed with a typical piece of circular tape. There's no distortion of the box to imply it may have been previously opened. My question is, should I sell it as new in box without opening the box? My concern is if I open it to check the item, then technically it's now an open box. Hey Mark, that's right. If you do open a sealed item, it is no longer sealed and can't be sold as new in box and must be sold as open box. I don't know if that's technically eBay's policy or not, but that's just good manners. If it's not new sealed, it's then new open box. I would not recommend doing that unless there are things indicating that it could have been opened previously and you're worried that it may not actually be sealed and new in box. But you do run that risk if you then open it that you can't sell it as new sealed, and it is going to likely be worth less money. One thing you can do, you can check sold comps for something in new condition, and you can also check sold comps for things in open box condition. I'm guessing some items there's less of a discrepancy in price between those two things, and so if you're kind of suspecting that some item has been opened, check the discrepancy between the new and open box sold price items. And if it's minimal, then you could, take the risk and go ahead and open it up and then sell it as open box instead of new in box. But personally, if something looks new, I sell it as new. I can't think of a reason why you would not want it to sell it as new unless you didn't think it was actually new. And in that case, yeah, you may want to open it up and check and make sure, but you do run the risk of making less money on it. Chris asks, hey Justin, I've been selling for a few months now and I'm starting to sell more. My eBay name is my personal name. I thought about changing it, but I've read somewhere that when you do this, it basically sets your account as new again or suppresses your listings for a while. Do you know anything about this or have any thoughts about it? Hey Chris, good question. eBay does let you change your account name. I think you can do it once every 30 days. So you can't change it every day, but I don't know why you'd want to do that anyway. But yeah, so if you have your personal name, but you're trying to be a little bit more professional and you want your eBay name to match your LLC name, or you just want to change it for whatever reason, you can definitely do that. And I don't think eBay cares at all. They're not going to suppress your listings in any sort of way. Like, that just doesn't make sense. Why would they suppress your listings? Why would they not want your items to sell? eBay's in the business of making money, of selling things. So this idea that they would suppress your listings for any reason other than you not following their policies is not something to worry about at all. And changing your eBay name is not against eBay's policies because they give you the ability to do it. So why would they give you the ability to do it, but then, penalize you for it? It just doesn't make much sense. So you're totally good to go. I have done this before a couple times. My primary eBay account that I use right now dates back to 2005. It's gone through a bunch of different name changes over the years. Most recently, I changed the name in about 2021, and I had no impact. It suffered no downsides to it in any way whatsoever. So I think you're totally fine. Change the name, make it match your business, and you'll be good to go. Mark in Iowa asks, sometimes I pick up items from estate sales that have a musty or cigarette odor. Do you have suggestions for how to remove those odors? These items are not clothing, so I can't just throw them in the washing machine. Hey, Mark. Yeah, so you have to be very careful when buying items used from thrift stores or garage sales or estate sales or flea markets like that, because often if they have cigarette smell in particular, it can completely undermine the value of that item, and it's very, very difficult to get it removed. And in fact, if I see clothing that I think would otherwise be worth a decent amount of money, but I give it the sniff test and it smells like cigarettes, I will often just pass on it because it's really difficult to completely get that smell out. And I just don't want a buyer who's expecting to get a not cigarette smelling shirt, get the shirt and have it smelling like cigarettes. It sounds like you also are not selling clothing in this situation, but the same rule applies. And often it's even more difficult to get the cigarette smell out of things that are not clothing for the reasons you suggest. You can't actually wash them. But for all items, one thing that I do to get rid of some of those weird smells or musty smells is I just put the items outside. I let them breathe for a while and just let them sit outside of the environment that gave them those smells. And you often get this at estate sales where houses just have a certain smell, or you're pulling something out of a basement. It's been sitting in the basement for 30 years. And so just getting it out of that environment, getting it in open air where there's breeze and all that, and letting it sit for as long as you possibly can, it's often going to do a really good job of getting rid of those musty smells and sort of returning it to a more neutral smell. I also have had luck buying some of these sort of charcoal bags. I think they're just bags of activated charcoal that you can put together. You can put it with the item in a closed area, and that will sort of suck up that smell. And so like I've bought books, for example, that have had a really weird smell. And so I'll put the stack of books in a paper sack and put some of those activated charcoal bags in there with it. And I'll let it sit for a month and pull it out. And it does a really good job actually of doing that. So those are my two methods, is just sort of let it breathe outside of the environment, which gave it the initial smell, and or, trying some of that activated charcoal. But if it's cigarette smoke, I just really don't risk it. I've found it's very difficult to completely get rid of it. And if I'm smelling it and I still can smell that faint smell of cigarette smoke, then I can bet that my buyer is going to as well. So I just don't end up selling those things. So good luck.
Hey Justin, quick question / suggestion. So I buy a lot of lots on estate sales near me, and instead of having individual prices, they kind of price my bin, box, or bag, whatever I'm carrying at the time. What I do now is I distribute, like if it's a $200 box, I divide X amount of items by 200, and that's the cost of goods. But sometimes I'll have items with low returns but high cost of goods because of this. Should I give the more valuable items a higher cost of goods and the lower valuable items a lower cost of goods? And the suggestion part of my video is I use Flipwise, love it, it's great. But because I do buy a lot of lots, would it be possible to incorporate lots into Flipwise so like this I could keep track of how much I'm making per lot instead of how much I'm making in total? That's what I used to do on my computer on like spreadsheets, but Flipwise made it a lot easier. But the lot feature would be cool if you could add it to it. Thank you. Keep up the good work, man. Love your videos.
Yeah, appreciate it, Alex. Thanks for that. Yeah, to answer your question, when I buy things in lots, and I often do buy, big lots of just many items for one flat price, I do one of two things. I either break the cost down evenly across all of them, and that's if they all have roughly the same value. It's just easier to give it a single cost of goods or an even cost of goods across all units than making sure that adds up to the total amount paid. But sometimes, actually very often, you'll buy a lot of things where there's a few items in that lot that are way more valuable than others. And in those situations, I typically do weight the cost of goods based on the rough value of that item. Typically what I do is about 10%. And so if an item's worth $100, I'll give it a $10 cost of goods. And it's, from a tax perspective, it really doesn't matter. From a tax perspective, it's really only the total amount that you spend and the total amount of money you make. And so as long as that stuff all adds up together, however you slice and dice it across each item doesn't really matter. But I like to look at the performance of my store on an individual item basis. And so if I give everything a $10 cost of goods and sell something for $8, that thing is a loss, when really it's not necessarily a loss. I should be giving it a lower cost of goods because it's less valuable, for example. So one example here, again, if I buy a lot of 10 things for $100, splitting them evenly would be fine, $10 across each. But let's say there's one item worth $500. I would give that a $50 cost of goods and then split the $50 amongst the rest of the items in that lot. And to answer your question about Flipwise, we do have a way to handle this today. It's not perfect and we're going to be improving it, but right now, what you can do is when you buy a lot is give everything in that lot a unique purchase location. And if you give it a unique purchase location, that allows you to see the total amount spent on that purchase location. And it also will track the performance of that unique purchase location over time. So I'll just use my store as an example here. If I go into manage and purchase locations, you're going to see all of my purchase locations, and you'll see one right here. I have some that are just generic, like Church Sales and Dick's Outlet and Encore Thrift, different stores, but I also have purchase locations specifically for bulk purchases. And so this D-Skims Nike is a bulk purchase right here. You can see here that I have 101 items in there, and I spent a total of $915 for this big lot of stuff. So far, I've grossed $555. I have netted negative $523, and I've received $384 back from that. So this one has not paid off yet. I'm still selling stuff from it, but by giving each bulk lot a unique purchase location in Flipwise, it allows you to group those things together and see their performance over time. Some of the changes that we're going to make going forward is allowing you to configure these purchase locations as like a bulk lot specifically, which the big difference there will be it will allow you to define a purchase price in total, and then any items you add to that purchase location will get an even cost of goods or a weighted cost of goods if you want that, instead of the reverse, because right now it's just totaling up your total cost of goods for every item in this group. So when we do the work in the future to better support bulk lots, it'll allow you to instead define a total cost like $915, and then it will split that cost across the items that are associated with that group. So it kind of just reverses it a little bit. But yeah, that's how I would do it today in Flipwise. It works pretty well. I can see very easily this one has not paid off yet. And over time, I'll be able to see once, I'm having a positive net profit margin and I'm actually making money on this purchase. So it's pretty cool. Deborah asks, everyone talks about printers. I use the QR code for eBay's discount shipping. I don't print anything. I go to the machine at the post office to scan my codes where it labeled prints for free. Is this not the most economical, fastest way to go? Hey, Deborah, I think you're right. That is probably the most economical way to go. And what Deborah is referring to is when you buy a label on eBay, you can choose to print it at home or you can choose to generate a QR code. You can then take that QR code into the post office if you don't have a printer, scan that QR code, and they will print the label for you. So if you do have a printer and it breaks, or you don't have a printer, this is a great way to get eBay discount shipping label rates without having to print at home. But you definitely want to be buying your labels on eBay or on a third-party shipping label provider like Pirate Ship, because if you go to the post office and buy your labels, they're going to be about 40 to 50% more expensive. So you're going to be paying a lot more money to ship your items. So yeah, this is a great way to be economical. But you also ask if it's the fastest way to go. And I think if you're shipping 1 or 2 items a day, it may be okay to do that. But once you get to the point where you're shipping, 5 or 10 items per day, it's definitely not the fastest, because you have to go to the post office, you have to scan each QR code, you have to wait for it to print, you have to put it on the label, then you have to maybe stand in line, and that just ends up being a lot slower than if you're at home and can print all the labels, take them to the post office and drop them off. So it's really a question for you. Like if you don't want to invest, $70 to $100 in a label printer, for example, but would prefer to do it this way and it makes sense for your business and the amount of time that you're spending and the amount of things that you're shipping, you should do that. But I think where it starts to break down is if you're trying to ship more than a couple things, then I think it would be economical, but it would not be the fastest way. Darren asks, I listed a card for sale on eBay for $20. Someone bought it and I went to the post office to send the item, but it cost me $7 to ship. eBay charged me $25 for the item, but I never got the money from eBay and shipping costs, so I ended up eating the shipping. What did I do wrong? I don't know that I understand your situation exactly, but I'll just explain how this works. Like when you sell something on eBay to someone, you sell it for $100 and you charge the buyer $15 in shipping. eBay then pays you $115. And then it's your job to go ship the item. And so eBay doesn't really care what it actually costs to ship. They just know that you charged the buyer $15 to ship and you sold it for $100. So they give you $115. They take out their fees and then you got to ship it. And so if you buy a shipping label that costs $15, then that means the sale amount goes back down to $100 since you spent $15 on shipping. So I don't know. I'm not sure what you did wrong there. Definitely don't go to the post office to buy your labels though. You'll pay about 40% more. Always buy them through eBay. They're much cheaper. Hopefully that helps. Nicholas asks, I'm a new reseller and I'm not super familiar with fashion and clothing. What do you recommend starting with getting into this niche? So my recommendation, if you're just starting to sell on eBay, is to start in a category that you know something about. That means you just don't have to learn a completely new category of things. But if you do just want to start with fashion or clothing, what I recommend, and this is not specific to fashion or clothing, but is just start looking stuff up. So go to a thrift store, go to the clothing section. Let's say you're going into men's clothing. Start on the racks, go through there, look through the racks, check the brands, just look everything up. You'll start to get a good idea of what has value and what doesn't. This will take some time because in clothing, 99% of everything there is not going to be worth buying to resell. So it will take some time for you to find the brands that are good, but that's how you get started, is by digging in and just doing it. With clothing though, another thing that you can do is just start to get a feel for clothing. When you are going through the racks, you will start to notice that certain pieces of clothing feel better than others. And I would trust your sense of touch there. When you feel a piece of clothing that feels more quality, that might mean that it is worth more money. Don't just rely on looking things up, but rely on touch, on how it feels. And then I would also recommend that you find some YouTubers that are specific to the categories that you're trying to sell in. And so I know that there's a lot of YouTubers out there that deal with nothing but clothing. They're going to give you some really good specific advice on where to start in that particular niche. I'm more of an everything seller, so I don't tend to get into really specific category tutorials or anything like that, but there's a lot of YouTubers out there that do, so I would check that out.
Hi, Justin. Thank you so much for all of the valuable information you've given us eBayers. I've been at this game only for about 3 months, and I have been binge watching your videos whenever I can. But one question I have not heard, maybe you've already answered it, but I haven't heard it yet. What is a good way to keep track of receipts and mileage? Right now, I just keep all of my receipts in this little file folder here, and I write the mileage at the top of the receipt. I have a lot of receipts, but I'm figuring there has to be an easier way. So what's a good way of keeping track of receipts and mileage? Thank you so much for answering my question.
Thanks, Valerie. Thank you for sending in a video. By the way, if you want to send in a video question like that, there's a link in the description below. I'd love to have you on the channel. It's a really good question. How do you keep track of mileage and receipts? And you're doing the right thing. It's great that you're keeping track of all that. I can offer up some tips that will help you simplify that. For mileage, I use an app called Mile IQ. It's on iOS or Android. And what it does, it runs in the background and it detects when you're traveling by car. And it allows you to very quickly, when you're done traveling by car, assign those trips as either personal or business. Really simple. It takes like a few seconds. Once you get out of the car, you get a little notification and you swipe left for business, you swipe right for personal. That's just a really quick way to track mileage. That way you're not having to look at the odometer and write down stuff like that. It just, it removes that. So it does come at a cost though. It costs $60 a year. You can write that off in your taxes. I think it's worth it, but it's up to you to decide whether that's worth it for you. But for me, it's definitely worth it because it just makes it so much easier and I don't have to keep a paper trail of all the miles that I drive for the business. And then when the year's over, I take that amount that I've driven in miles and I multiply it by whatever the IRS is giving you on a per mile basis as a tax write-off. Then I put that into the Flipwise ledger just so I have it along with my other business expenses for tax reporting. As far as receipts, it's good that you're keeping all your receipts too. That's definitely a good idea. What I would recommend is continue to keep your receipts like that, but take the costs out of the receipt and start to track it, whether that's in a spreadsheet or whether it's in inventory management software like my own, Flipwise. Doesn't matter really what you use, but it's a good idea to get those costs out of a paper receipt. That way it's much easier to calculate and deal with come tax time. Otherwise, you're going to be going through all those receipts at the end of the year and it's going to take a super long time. By getting the costs outside of the receipts and into some software, also also makes it easier to track expenses that you don't have a receipt for. And so if you're sourcing at garage sales, for example, or flea markets, you're probably not getting receipts there, but you still want to track those expenses. And by having a spreadsheet or by using automated inventory management software like Flipwise, that allows you to track all of that stuff, even if you don't have a paper receipt. And by doing this, you can also more easily track the performance of your business in real time. If you get it out of paper receipts, then you just know how your business is performing. It's really hard to know just by looking at a big pile of receipts. So getting those costs out of there, getting them into some software, then you start to understand the performance of your business, even down to how individual items are performing, what your net return was on them, what your ROI was for them. So keep doing what you're doing. If you want to make it a little bit easier, switch to a mile tracking software like MileIQ. And then I would definitely recommend to start taking those receipts, itemizing them in a spreadsheet or in some inventory management software like Flipwise. Thank you for the question. I appreciate it. Sir LT Sells It asks, not long ago, I watched a video where an official eBay employee of significance said that once an item has been listed for 9 months, it should be ended and relisted unless the item is scarce enough to be seen in search results. The thought is that the item would be so low in the returned results that it likely wouldn't be seen. With this in mind, I adopted a 6-month end and relist policy. Do you have a specific listing age where you end and relist? Thanks for sending that along. It sounds right. You know, it's interesting to hear sort of a more official answer. It would be helpful if they sort of documented those answers on their website or gave you more, you know, something to source or reference. But I think that seems generally right from my perspective. But to answer your question, do you have a specific listing age when you end and relist? I think it depends on the item. If the item has a ton of supply, if there's hundreds or thousands of listings, that means you should probably end and relist more frequently, just because the item has so much supply and there is more of a chance of it getting sort of lost in the search results. So if you have something with thousands of listings, yeah, definitely end and relist more frequently. But if something has lower supply, there's just less of a chance of it getting lost in search results. And I think that person at eBay kind of said something similar to you where, you know, they said, unless the item is scarce enough to be seen in search results. Yeah, so it's a scale. Every few months or so, I'll go in and mass in the last 200 oldest items in my store and relist those. And I just do that sort of arbitrarily. I don't look at the supply and demand of each one of them. I just do them all in that regard. And so that means about once every, 5 to 6 months, my entire store gets turned over. It sounds like I'm doing about what you're doing there, which is like turning over my entire store every 6 months or so. Randy Carson asks, lately it seems like other eBay YouTubers are spending a lot of time talking about how bad things are for resellers. Anyone else pick up on that? I'm new to eBay, so what's going on? Too many sellers and not enough low-cost inventory? Hey, Randy. Yeah, I think that is a pretty common thing. I would urge you to not read into that too much. The truth is that type of content gets clicks, it gets people, ooh, what's going on? I'm going to click it. I'm going to watch it. It's just, unfortunately, it's like a common trend, not specific to reselling or anything, but a common trend on YouTube is that type of sort of negativity and saying that everything's terrible, nothing's ever going to be the same. All that stuff is just going to generate more interest in the videos. So, I would urge you to not be influenced by that too much. Definitely things are changing for resellers, and that's expected. Everything changes. Every single industry changes over time through when new technology comes out and, industries shift and all sorts of things. Nothing is ever going to be the same. And so as a reseller, you should prepare yourself for change. You should not get afraid of change. You should welcome change and try to find the opportunity in change. But don't get caught up in the drama. Don't get caught up in the negativity. There's always going to be a market for reselling. It's going to be different, but there's always going to be a market for reselling. It's existed for hundreds and thousands of years. It will continue to exist. Reselling is as old as capitalism and whatever came before capitalism. Reselling is here to stay. It's not going away, but it is definitely changing. And, is it harder? Yeah, it could be a lot harder, but it's also easier in a lot of ways. The technology that has made it harder is also the same technology that's made it easier, and so getting the power of reselling into more people's hands creates more competition. Yeah. And that just means if you want to stand out and do better, you got to be slightly better than everyone else. Plenty of people out there are doing great on reselling right now. It's a popular thing to say in a YouTube title, unfortunately. Kathy asks, hi, Justin. I just found your channel last week. I love your content. Thank you. I never sold electronics. I recently inherited 4 Bose Wave radios and 1 LG VCR CD player. I decided that this would be a good time to learn how to sell electronics. I don't have all the remotes for the items, and I don't know how well I need to pack them. Can you please give me some advice? Sure. be happy to give you some advice. Bose Wave radios do really good with or without the remote. What you can do is look up the value of these electronic items that have remotes. Look them up with the remote, see what the value is. Look them up without the remote and see what the value is. Then look up how much the remote costs. And if it makes sense to buy a remote off of eBay so that you can package it together with the unit that doesn't have a remote and you'll make more money, you can do it. If not, you don't have to. Most of the time I don't do it. Most of the time it's not worth it, meaning the remote costs more than the difference between the value of selling it with the remote than without the remote. So it just doesn't make sense to do it. Sometimes it does, but not very often. So I just end up selling them without the remote. And those Bose Wave systems sell really well with or without the remote. In terms of packing, it really goes for anything else. I would treat electronics as delicate items. You want to pack them in a way that protects them, obviously, from being jostled around too much. Also, you want to protect them from any sort of like liquid damage that could happen. And so typically with a Bose Wave radio like that or a VCR, they're being wrapped in bubble wrap first, and that is to give them a nice amount of padding, but also protect them from any liquids that could come in contact with the box. And then make sure you have enough void fill around that in between the box and the bubble wrapped item. What you want to do once it's in the box and once it's taped, just give it a good shake. Make sure it's not moving around at all. Make sure that there's no movement in the box like that. And that typically means you're good to go. And it's really not too bad. Don asks, how is a poly bag shipped? Ground Advantage? Hey Don, yeah, usually I ship almost everything Ground Advantage these days, but definitely stuff that goes into a poly bag typically goes Ground Advantage, if not Ground Advantage Priority, depending on what the item actually is. But yeah, you can use any box or poly bag or anything to ship Ground Advantage. The only restrictions when it comes to boxes are priority. So if you have a priority box, it's labeled priority or it's labeled some other specific post office service, you can only use it for that service. So you can only ship using priority. So if you have an item in a priority box and you try to ship that Ground Advantage, they won't let you do that. But you can use any box and you can ship that Ground Advantage or priority or any other service. Mr. Carlos asks, hi Justin, I'm a new reseller. This is my favorite channel. Well, thanks. My question is, if I list an item as not working, parts only, can it still be returned? Hey, Mr. Carlos, yes, it can still be returned unless you turn off returns on that item. But just listing it as condition 4 parts not working does not mean it's not ineligible for returns. It can still be returned. And so when I sell things 4 parts not working, I make sure that my return policy for that item specifically does not allow returns. And technically, a buyer can return anything, regardless of whether you accept returns or not. On eBay, a buyer can still return stuff. However, the buyer would have to select item not as described. And as long as your condition is set as 4 parts not working and you're putting all over in the title and the description that this is not a working unit, it's being sold for parts, that does cover you pretty well if somebody comes back and says, well, I need to return this anyway because I thought it worked and it didn't. At the end of the day, they can still probably return it, and your time is worth money too. And so if you're spending a bunch of time trying to fight a buyer who wants to return an item who says it's not as described and it's sold for parts, and it's just a big hassle to do that. So, but this should cover you for 99% of the time. I don't think I've ever had an item not as described return on a 4 parts not working when I had no returns turned on. So it's definitely not an issue, but that's going to protect you the most, is just make sure that you set the condition correctly and then make sure you turn off returns for the return policy on that item alone. Casper asks, could you explain the Minnesota road improvement and food delivery eBay fee is now collecting in addition to sales tax? eBay gets a little raise with the additional fees being added to the total price. Yeah, Casper, sure. Happy to answer that. I don't know about this particular fee in particular, this Minnesota road improvement and food delivery fee. So different states have different rules and laws in place, and I'm guessing Minnesota is making eBay charge this additional, road and improvement and delivery fee tax. That eBay is not just for fun, collecting an additional tax for Minnesota residents to help them build their roads. The state government is making them do that, so they're tacking that on as an additional fee. As to your question about eBay getting a little raise, yeah, eBay considers your total sale price inclusive of any fees, including sales tax and I guess including Minnesota road improvement and food delivery taxes. to calculate your final value fees. And a lot of sellers get kind of bent out of shape about that, which I can understand. Why do you have to pay fees on something like sales tax? Personally, I don't really care that eBay includes those taxes when calculating final value fees, because that's a service that they're providing. They collect and remit sales tax on your behalf. In this case, they're collecting the road improvement taxes and remitting it to the state on your behalf. That's a service that costs them money to do it. So to me, it makes sense that they're going to charge that final value fee on the total amount, including those taxes, to help pay for the services that come with collecting and remitting those taxes on your behalf as a seller. So you don't have to do that. So you're taking a very small percentage and giving it to eBay so that they can do that. That's how I justify it. But I get not everyone would have the same take on it. But that's the situation. User asks, I sold a pair of shoes on eBay that the buyer wants to return. His excuse is damaged in shipping. He had them for a month before requesting a return. His picture shows scuffed up, dirty shoes. I sent him clean, non-scuffed shoes. eBay made me send him a return label and are holding funds till returned and I refund. I contacted him and told him my complaint, and he is arguing with me in Spanish. I wish I could send you his pictures to compare with mine. Anyway, what can I do about this? Yeah, that's kind of a crappy situation. It definitely happens from time to time. There's a couple things that I'll address here and give you some advice on. First is the window of time with which this buyer opened up a return. Is it within the return window? If not, you may not have to accept the return. So if your return window is 30 days and they're coming at you at 45 days, you may be able to decline the return entirely. It sounds like that's not the case because eBay already provided the shipping label. So I don't think that's the case. But the second thing you can do, I often get buyers asking me questions or trying to troubleshoot in other languages, and I just use Google Translate, and it works out pretty well, actually. And I think buyers kind of appreciate that you're making an effort to communicate with them in their language. And I've been able to solve a lot of problems in that way. So I would suggest perhaps reaching back out to this buyer and talking to them in their native language to see if you can't figure out what's going on. But I think what's happening here is some sort of scam, whether it is a partial refund scam where the buyer's saying, hey, these aren't in the condition that I expected them to be, please give me some money back, or they're swapping some old boots out for the new ones, which sounds like it could be the case here. And so one, requires that they send the item back before you give any money back. If they send the item back and it's clearly a different pair of boots, or they've just beaten these boots to hell, you don't have to give a full refund necessarily. So if you are either a top-rated seller or you offer free returns, eBay allows you in situations like this where you sent the item out in some condition and it came back in a completely different condition on a return, they allow you to give a partial refund of up to 50% back. And so if you get the items back and something is amiss right there, don't send a full refund. Send only 50% of the money back, saying like, hey, these aren't the boots that I sent you, or I sent you a clean pair of boots and you sent them back all beat to hell. And so I'm only giving you a 50% refund because eBay allows me to do that under their policy. And they will probably get mad. They might leave you negative feedback. They might reach out to eBay, and eBay will refund their money in full, but it won't come from you. And eBay will remove any negative feedback that's left as a result of following their policies like this. So this is a good reason to, one, be a top-rated seller on eBay or offer free returns, is because it allows you to only give that partial refund upon receiving the item back if it's in a different condition than what you sold it in. So that's what I would recommend. Any chance you might ever compile a list of common items that you piece out? That seems like it would be pretty difficult to do. I don't have any special knowledge there. I just look things up. I think a good way to think about this is just, if the unit itself is in demand and is of high quality, then there's a pretty good chance that the pieces are also going to be in demand. So I don't think I would ever compile a list necessarily. I don't know any special information necessarily. I just know how to look things up. But when you're outsourcing or when you're wondering whether a thing is worth parting out or not, just do a search for the model number or whatever and put parts at the end of it, or put replacement at the end of it. That's going to be the best way to see how those units are being parted out by other people and what the value of those parts are. And over time, you will start to learn the types of things that can get parted out in that way. Tammy asks, hi Justin, I just had an experience that I think was harder than it needed to be. A buyer wanted to buy 2 items from 2 separate listings, but with combined shipping. I couldn't figure out how else to do it aside from combining the 2 listings into one and increasing the weight and box size to cover the shipping, which was less expensive than had she bought each item separately. I googled this issue and found advice to have the buyer buy the items and then send an invoice with combined shipping, but we couldn't figure out how she could buy the items without paying so I could invoice her. And now in my stats, it looks like one of my items didn't sell because when I combined the 2 listings and had to end the other listing, if that makes sense. Help. So yeah, this is a little bit of a confusing area on eBay when you're selling, is combined shipping. So it really depends on how the buyer buys. If the buyer buys two items in the same order, it's a little bit easier to combine shipping there. But sometimes the buyer buys two items in two separate orders. Either way, you can handle this. So if they buy the items in the same order, you'll be able to print a single shipping label for both items and put them in the same box. And then depending on how much money they paid in shipping up front, you may want to send a refund for the shipping overage, which you can do. So it also depends on just how much you charge for shipping. So I'll assume that you had charged shipping separately on both items. And so you sold a t-shirt and a mug, and the t-shirt was sold for $10 and $5 in shipping, and the mug was sold for $10 and $5 in shipping. So you have a $20 order with $10 in shipping and $30 total. So if that's the case, and it only cost, $8 to ship, you could refund that $2. But if it's a separate order, it gets a little bit more confusing because you have to fulfill two separate orders. And you can do the exact same thing still. You can put the shirt and the mug in the same box. Then you go in and basically select one of the orders and ship it using the combined weight and dimensions of the package containing both items. And you'll get a shipping label and a tracking number back. You'll use that, and then you can copy and paste that tracking number and manually apply it to the second order. So you'll have two orders with the same tracking number, and that's a way to go about getting that as well. So there's basically a couple ways that you can do it depending on how the buyer orders it in the first place. I get that's kind of confusing though. And I don't think I actually explained it all that well. So hopefully that made sense. All right, K Comics asks, you've mentioned in past videos that you offer free returns on your listings. I currently don't, but I've heard doing so will increase the percentage of items you sell. Similar to how you've shown on Flipwise that your sales went up after you started doing promoted listings, do you have any data to prove this is true? I only list comics, and I'm mainly concerned that someone might just read the comic and return it. Thanks. So yeah, I've shown in the past like the impact that turning promoted listings on can have on your store. For me, it was, crazy. Like overnight, I started selling twice as much as I normally sold. It was very easy to see on a graph, like here's time before I turned promoted listings on, and here's the time after I turned promoted listings on, and be able to compare the two. I think with free returns, it will be much more of a subtle difference, not as high of a contrast between before and after. And also I've had free returns turned on for a long time. And so I don't think I have data that goes back to show like, here's the date that I turn free returns on to see the difference between the two. But even if I did, I think it would be a lot more subtle than it was with promoted listings. But when it comes to making the decision on whether you should offer free returns or not, just think of it from a buyer's perspective. Do buyers want to be able to return stuff? Yes. Do buyers think it's weird if they can't return something? Yes. Do buyers want to be able to return stuff without having to pay money? Yes. And so if a buyer is looking at two listings for the same exact product, one of them offers free returns and one of them doesn't, and they're priced otherwise the exact same, my guess is that most buyers are going to choose the one that ensures that they can return it if they want to at no cost to them. So I just think it's a value add, and even not looking at the data at all, it's just more attractive. And so more buyers are going to want it. It could be category specific though. I don't know the comic book category very well at all. And so, my guess is that people buying comic books are doing it to collect them, not to just like read them like a library. So I don't know, but you would want to like experiment with this yourself. But I do know that eBay provides some metrics here. Like if you just look at this page here from eBay, when they talk about turning on free returns, they say that like your sales will increase up to 25%. So if you have no returns right now and you turn on free 60-day returns, they say it's going to increase your sales by 25%, which is significant. 60-day returns, that's quite a bit. I have 30-day free returns. And so, if you don't offer returns at all right now and you turn on 30-day free returns, they're saying you can expect your sales to increase by 15%. So I don't know. I don't have that data myself. This is coming from eBay, but I'll leave you with that. JF Gibson asks, hi JR, 2 questions. I don't remember ever hearing if you hit the bin stores from time to time. Ever go? And 2, any chance you might ever compile a list of common items that you piece out? I have no idea what to look for in terms of appliances with parts that are in demand. Sure, no problem. I can go through those questions. I will admit, when you said hi JR, it took me way too long to figure out what JR was. I was like, JR, is that? It's not my, what is that? And I was like, oh yeah, Justin Resells. That's the name of my YouTube channel. So anyway, So bin stores, I don't know if you mean like Goodwill bins or the bin stores where they dump a bunch of stuff from Amazon and other places like that into like the wooden bins and you go through them. I do go to the Goodwill bins. I haven't been in a while, but I really like going there. It's a fun place to source new inventory. And I have gone to bin stores occasionally, but to be honest, it's just not really my style. I know you can get some great deals there, but I don't know. I just kind of like the hunt of it. I like looking for weird and unique stuff. And usually at the bin stores, it's just like things that you would find on Amazon or Target or things like that, which, don't get me wrong, all that stuff can be profitable, but I just don't find the inventory all that interesting. And so I prefer to kind of hunt and find and learn about new weird things. And I found that bin stores just aren't really conducive for that type of sourcing, but I know you can make good money there. Goodwill bins, I definitely like to go to. It is hectic, it's crazy, but you could just find the weirdest stuff there. And that's the type of sourcing that I like doing. Libby asks, I'm a dabbler on my way to becoming part-time, just starting to up my game. I not only like to get a deal, I like to give a deal too, so I will often price items below the price that eBay suggests, to not only pay it forward, but because I also may have inadvertently skipped the comps process and now see that there are 375 of my fishing reels currently listed. Do you think eBay dings me somehow because I often undervalue items? Thanks, Libby. I don't think eBay is going to care at all if you undervalue your items. All they're interested in is making sales. And so I think they will encourage you to undervalue your items because it is going to generate sales more frequently by selling things for below their market value. However, if you're selling things in the same niche, like all fishing rods, for example, I would be careful, always undervaluing your items because you're going to impact the market value of those items. And although you may not care about getting less, other sellers in that space care more about making more money. And if you consistently undervalue your items by a lot, you may sell them more quickly, but you're going to impact that market value for all sellers. And so I would tread lightly there, honestly. But really, I want to narrow in on the part that you said about the price that eBay suggests that you should price it at. And I think you're referring to the box when you're listing items on eBay, and it gets to the point where you have to give it a price, and it says eBay suggests the median sold value is this, and so you can price it at that amount. Do not trust that box at all. The vast majority of the time, the price in that box is just flat out wrong. It is very difficult to price things on eBay accurately for a number of different reasons. I'm not going to go into all those reasons right now. I have a separate video called the eBay pricing problem that breaks that problem down very specifically, and I spent a bunch of time talking about it, so I'll link to that video in particular. But my point is, the price that eBay suggests there is often wrong, and if you're only using that to price your items, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. So what you want to do is do comp research, as you suggested. You want to check the active listings. You want to check the sold listings. You want to compare the active market value with the sold market value to get an idea of the ranges between those two, because often an item will sell for a lot less than it is actively listed for a lot of different reasons. And so get an idea of what the other items are actually selling for to price your items and compare it to that median price value that eBay suggests in their box. You'll just find that it's often way lower or way higher or just not right at all. And so you don't want to use that. You want to use your own comp research and price it at that. And if you want to go a little bit lower to stay competitive, definitely do that. But again, I would hesitate going considerably lower all the time, especially if you're working in the same niche. It's just going to work against you and other sellers in that niche. So tread lightly there, but definitely don't trust that suggested price when listing. Do your own research and figure out a price that way. Terry asks, how do you get eBay on the phone? Have had a few return issues that I wanted to speak to them about. Yeah, getting eBay on the phone can be difficult. Once you get them on the phone, I have found them to be very, very helpful, but getting them on the phone can be difficult. I was going to walk through the specific process to show you, but eBay changes their UI, their user interface, so often that this video would become outdated pretty quickly. I've had the most success going into eBay, clicking around their help section, but doing it as a buyer, pretending I have a problem as a buyer. The first level support agents are equipped to handle seller questions as well, and if they can't, they can transfer you to a seller help department. So pretend you're a buyer, and that's a much easier way to get them on the phone. If you can get like a chat window going, even with their automated chat system, and say, let me talk to an agent, they will ask you some questions automatically, but you keep saying, let me talk to an agent, and then they'll give you an option to have an agent call you. That's the best way to do it. Usually I can find within a few clicks and have them on the phone within a couple of minutes, so give that a shot. Cynthia asks, what is the etiquette on offers? I sent a potential buyer an offer after a couple of days of back and forth in messages. Yes, red flag. I finally sent them an offer and now nothing. In the meantime, I've received an offer from another buyer. Do I need to wait for the offer I sent to expire, or can I accost the offer I received? But Cynthia, I think there's no red flags there at all. I mean, you sent a potential buyer an offer after a couple of days of back and forth. Meh. I mean, I guess maybe sometimes I talk about problematic buyers and asking a bunch of questions, but don't let that scare you from just interacting with potential customers, because I definitely do interact with potential customers. When I don't, though, is when they just send the types of messages that often lead to problematic situations later. Like if they're asking questions that can be answered in the description below, or if they're asking very detailed questions that suggest that they're not going to appreciate a used item and they're going to expect that it's brand new, for example. But to answer your question there, no etiquette there at all. You can send out a bunch of offers, and it's on the burden's on the buyer to accept the offer. The first person to accept the offer wins it, and you should feel comfortable sending out as many offers as you can, no matter whether there are outstanding offers. So I wouldn't worry about it at all. Just send them out and take the first best offer you get.
Hey Justin, love your show. Every single time I ship something through FedEx with a label that I've purchased on eBay, FedEx charges my account a second time somewhere later down the road. Have you ever experienced this? What have you done to fix that? I put in the correct weight, usually even a pound or so over if it's a larger package. I put in the correct dimensions into eBay. Just curious on what your thought is on this.
Yeah, Danny, thanks. I definitely have had that happen. It does seem to be a more recent problem with FedEx in particular. I'm not exactly sure why, to be honest. But what happens is you ship something via FedEx, you put the right dimensions, the right weights, and then a week or a month later, you get a notice saying that FedEx is charging you more because you underweighed or undermeasured. I'm not exactly sure why, especially if it's just not true. You can contest these charges. I would start with eBay. I would contact eBay and talk to them first. I've heard reports that the problem sometimes is with eBay and their calculation and how they send that off to FedEx. I've heard of people getting money back directly from eBay on that, but I've also heard that people have to contest it through FedEx. I've never had that happen to me in such a way that it's so much money that I think it's worth actually going out and getting a refund on it. So I've been pretty lucky, but I don't know why. And I think if it's continuously happening on FedEx for you, I would maybe think about not shipping FedEx. It's a good way to just, not support the company if they're continuously, making mistakes like this. You might want to think about UPS. Personally, I prefer FedEx over UPS. I have a UPS store that's closer to me, but the parking lot is not a good situation. It's like in a parking lot of a grocery store, and it's hard. I don't want to carry these giant packages very far. Whereas with FedEx, I can pull almost directly up to the door and drop off. So it's very personal why I ship FedEx, but I don't have that problem, or I don't have that problem regularly, I should say. I have experienced the problem in the past, but it's just not a regular problem. So yeah, reach out to eBay, reach out to FedEx, contest those charges. You will most likely get your money back on that, but it's a pain. And so consider not shipping through FedEx. If they're going to screw you around, just don't use them. Tom asks, I was wondering if you had any comments on the process of transitioning a little side hustle into a real business. I have over 25 years of feedback and experience on eBay, and I'm looking to set up an LLC here in the next month or two and scale my business substantially. I would like to start fresh with a new account for the business and separate it from my personal finances for tax purposes, but don't want to lose all that positive feedback and experience. Any suggestions on how that can be accomplished? I suppose what I'm asking is, how do I go about separating my personal eBay account from a business account while preserving some of the benefits of the original persona account? Thanks, Tom. That's a really good question. And this situation is something I faced in particular. And I'll tell you what I did there, which is I had a long-standing eBay account that I've had since 2005. That's actually my second account. I have an account that goes back to like 97, but somehow I lost access to that one. So my current eBay account goes back to 2005. When I started taking eBay more seriously, I wanted to split my personal eBay activities from my business eBay activities, but I also didn't want to lose the clout that comes with having such an old account and the feedback that I built up over the years. So what I did is I just made that old account my business account, and I set up a separate account, new account for personal stuff. So that's what I would recommend you do as well. If you set up an LLC, you can, change the contact information to be that LLC. You can change the eBay name as well. You can change the account name. I think you can do that once every 30 days. eBay limits you, but you can change the account name. And then just set up a new account for the personal account, and you should be good to go. User asks, how are you, Justin? I'm good. How are you? Recently, another flipper on YouTube said that eBay does not like the listed items title in all caps. He also said he doesn't really know why this is. Have you heard about this? If so, do you know why? That's a good question. You see this on eBay quite a bit, just listing titles in all caps. One of my pet peeves for sure when I'm going off and selling similar. I always avoid the listings in all caps just because I don't want my listings to be in all caps and I don't want to have to change them to regular case. But I don't know that eBay has a policy against this per se, but it is a readability issue, and that's why you don't want to do it. Typing in all caps forms all of the letters as squares, which makes it hard for the human eye to read and comprehend. So it's just, you definitely just want to do it for readability's sake. When you're listing stuff on eBay, you're often competing against a ton of other listings. And so by doing things that make yours less readable than other listings, it's going to hurt you. And some people think, well, this might make my listing more readable because mine's in all caps. And if people don't like it, the human brain does not interpret all caps very well. It's difficult to read. I'm not making this up. These are design studies out there that show this. And I don't think eBay has a policy, but they want you to make sales. They want to make sales. And so they would probably advise you not to do it.
Hello, Justin. Thanks for the channel. Sure. My question is about garment measurements. In the last video, you showed a reseller's measuring stick. So say if a garment actually measures 40 inches across the chest, it's not going to actually fit a 40-inch chest. It's going to fit 38 inches or less because you need some room to be able to wear the garment. So my question is, do you point this out to the buyers that a garment measuring 40 inches across the chest does not actually fit 40 inches? Because I just got a feeling that most buyers wouldn't understand this. Thanks very much.
Sure, Helen. Thanks for reaching out. Good question. Yeah. So when you put measurements in, typically you measure kind of the what they call pit to pit, or the chest measurement for a shirt, just from each side. And then I don't know what you call the other measurement. Usually it's from the top of the back of the neck down to the lowest hanging part of the shirt. And yeah, you're giving the measurements of the shirt there, not necessarily of the human being that's wearing the shirt. And so I've never specified anything beyond just that. And my reasoning for that, I think when people go to buy clothing items on eBay and are looking at measurements, they have in their head what the measurement is of a shirt that fits them well. At least that's how I handle it, because I sometimes go on eBay and buy shirts and I check the measurements. And I check the measurements not by measuring my own chest, but I check the measurements by measuring other shirts that fit me really well. And then I find other shirts that have that exact same measurement. So that's my reasoning, but it's a good question and I don't have the answer to it. And so if y'all have an idea, let me know in the comments below. Should you be changing measurements or including measurements, that reflect what the size of the person should be that's actually wearing the shirt? I've never done it, never had any issues, but curious to hear if y'all do that or have any other advice related to that. So let me know. All right, let's get into my sales for the week. By the way, I'll be answering more viewer questions sprinkled throughout all of these top 10 sales. If you have any questions for me, leave them in the comment section below and I will answer them in a future video. By the way, I have time codes in the description below, so if you want to jump to a very specific question, look for those time codes and you can do so there. Tammy asks, if you have an item, say a vintage plastic sports sign that has a few minor scratches, do you make a point of calling it out in the description to make sure the buyer is aware before they buy? Or do you just let the photos do the talking? Thanks, Tammy. I think you definitely want to do both. So take very good pictures. Make sure you take pictures that show any sort of scratches or damaging, and then also call it out in the description. I use the condition description there. I will sometimes also copy and paste that into the description below, just so it's in multiple places. And if the damage is particularly hard to see in the photos, I might even put something in the title to alert the potential buyer. Like a lot of people use the word read, R-E-A-D, in all caps. Sometimes I do that as well. Take really good photos, call it out in the description multiple times, and definitely don't just let the photos do the talking. You want to overdo it.
Hi, Justin. I have a question. When I'm selling, say, brand new suits new with tags, should I show pictures of the measurements on those items? Thank you very much, and I love your video.
Thanks, Mike. So your question is, should I include pictures of the measurements when I'm selling clothing? You mentioned a suit. I'll just say, generically with clothing, I prefer to do both. List the measurements in the description or in the condition description or in the title somewhere or in the metadata somewhere, have the actual dimensions and measurements of the item you're selling, and then also in the picture as well. I think it's an accessibility thing. Not everyone is going to be able to see the measurements through the pictures, or not everyone's going to be able to read the description in that way. And so if you have both options, it's just opening yourself up to more buyers. And I have a very quick way of doing that. I use this tool. I think it's called the Reseller Ruler. I actually don't love it. It's not amazing, but it's okay. And it's like this tool that basically has two yardsticks connected together. So you can very quickly just sort of like spin it around and get both like the chest measurements and the whatever the measurement is called from the top of the neck down to the bottom for shirts, for example. And so it makes that pretty quick, and I use it pretty often. So I just end up taking a picture with that Reseller Ruler laid over it, and then also listed in the description as well. So you don't have to, but I think you're just going to open up yourself to more buyers if you are listing it in both places, and you're going to probably reduce the chances of someone not seeing the measurements or reading the measurements if you're offering it in two places. Even for new clothing too. I would recommend doing it for new clothing because just, sizes are not consistent. They are different depending on the brand, depending on when it was manufactured. A large in 2024 is very different than a large in 1998, for example. So it's good to use those measurements. Any chance you might ever compile a list of common items that you piece out? That seems like it would be pretty difficult to do. I don't have any special knowledge there. I just look things up. I think a good way to think about this is just, if the unit itself is in demand and is of high quality, then there's a pretty good chance that the pieces are also going to be in demand. So I don't think I would ever compile a list necessarily. I don't know any special information necessarily. I just know how to look things up. But when you're outsourcing or when you're wondering whether a thing is worth parting out or not, just do a search for the model number or whatever and put parts at the end of it, or put replacement at the end of it. That's going to be the best way to see how those units are being parted out by other people and what the value of those parts are. And over time, you will start to learn the types of things that can get parted out in that way. Esoteric Explorers Martinez asks, I don't have room for a printer. Do you have suggestions for a thermal printer? So I use what do I use? I use a Dymo 4XL, and I really like it. I think it's a great printer, but it is on the expensive side. I bought this quite a while ago before there was a lot of sort of cheaper, but still pretty good thermal printers like Rollos and those things. So you can definitely find cheaper ones than the Dymo 4XL, but I already have it. It works really great. I've never had any issues. Do you have recommendations for a thermal printer? Leave them in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what you have success with. Brad asks, hi Justin, when you're researching sold comps for a pre-owned item, should you only consider pre-owned sales or all sales for that item, new and used? So what Brad is referring to here is when you're checking comps on eBay, so say you're at a thrift store, you pick something up, you want to see how much it's worth on eBay, you're checking active listings to see how much the active market value is for an item, but then you also want to be checking sold listings to see what the sold market value is. This allows you to understand what something is actually selling for, which is often different and more than what it is actually sold for. So you want to have both numbers in mind, and that also allows you to check the sell-through rate to be able to see how many active listings there are, how many sold listings there are, so that you can estimate about how long it takes for the item to sell. And so if you're researching a used item, a pre-owned item, what Brad is asking, do I need to check comps exclusively to pre-owned items, or can I also include new items in those searches? And you definitely do want to filter by the condition when checking sold comps, because there's often a huge discrepancy in value between new items and used items. So the first thing I do when I'm checking comps is I adjust the filter to match the condition of the item that I have. So if I have a brand new in box item, I'm changing the condition filter to only include new items to get an understanding of what it's worth. And if it's a used item, I'm changing the condition filter to used to understand what it's worth. So it's definitely an important step. You definitely want to change the condition filter. It's going to give you a much more accurate understanding of the value of the item that you have. Robert asks, Justin, I had an email from a buyer that bought a purse last April, and she said that the leather fell off. It was a Burberry in imperfect condition when I mailed it to her. She paid $135. She said my $20 price was too high. She said I should not have scammed pictures as I had every inch of that purse on my pictures with no flaws. What do you make of this, and should I answer her? She did not ask for a refund, just yelling at me. Hey Robert, this sounds like a classic example of a buyer trying to fish for a partial refund. So if you have a buyer who reaches out after the sale has happened and after they receive the item with threatening language or yelling at you or saying that it's not as described, saying something is broken in a way that you're pretty sure that it is not, most likely that person is just trying to get a partial refund. They try to bully sellers. They try to scare them, putting the fear of negative feedback into their minds and try to demand extra money. And so if they're not interested in returning the item, they're just like out there sending you messages. If they haven't opened up a case, your response should be, I'm sorry you're not happy with the item. Please open up a return, send it back, and you'll get a refund. Don't cave to a partial refund. And that sounds exactly like someone trying to fish for a partial refund. Jose asks, quick question, if I use Pirate Ship or another shipping app, can I avoid eBay fees on the shipping part? I've noticed that the box in a bag option is way cheaper on Pirate Ship, and saving even $1 on shipping fees really adds up if you're selling a lot. So no, that's not how it works. So when you sell something for $100 and you charge the buyer $15 in shipping, that means the buyer pays $115, and that's how much you get back from eBay for the sale minus their fees. And then you have to ship it. And so it doesn't matter if you use eBay to ship it or Pirate Ship or go to the post office or wherever, eBay's going to charge you the final value fee based on the amount that the buyer paid to ship, regardless of where you bought the label, if that makes sense. He said, also, do you have any other shipping tips to cut costs? In your August 5 video around 10/12, you shipped a Skims logo mesh cami bodysuit for just $2.25. That's super low. How did you do that? Yeah, for that one, that was just a combined shipping. So that buyer bought multiple items that I was able to combine into a single package and then split the cost of ship across each item. So that's why it looks like that was really, cheap to ship. It just went into a box with 2 or 3 other things that probably cost, $5 or $6 to ship. So that's what was going on there. Edgar asks, I see that when you create your list, you promote it at 2%. That doesn't affect your list from appearing in the first searches. For me, it always suggests 11.5%. But many times my list isn't at the top anyway, so what should I do? Thanks. Yeah, Edgar, so you're talking about promoted listings. You probably saw my listing process where I put in 2%. I do promote everything at 2%. It's important to understand, though, how promoted listings work. So when you use promoted listings, the standard variation of promoted listings, what you're doing is paying eBay a small amount, a small fee to show your listings near the top of the search results. There's other places where they might show up throughout the eBay universe, but search is the big one. And so if you pay, let's say 2%, that means that for some fraction of times that someone searches a term that's related to the item that you're selling and promoting, your item is going to show up near the top of the search results. It doesn't mean it's always going to show up at the top of the results. The higher the percentage you pay, the more frequently it's going to show up near the top of search results. So if you're promoting it 2% or even 50%, you may go and do a search and not see your listing at the top there. That's because you're not paying to promote it 100% of the time. You'd be giving up the entirety of your sale amount if you were to promote it at 100%. So you're only paying to have it show up in relevant times for a small fraction of the searches that happen. So if you go out there and check and don't see your listing at the top of the search results, that's why, because you're not paying to have it up there all the time. eBay does give you suggested rates, and I think that they're coming up with these suggested rates based on demand. And so if there's a lot of competition, likely they're going to suggest that you need a higher rate to stand out. Personally, I just promoted at 2%. I'm completely happy with that. You can promote it at more, and that's just going to mean that your item gets shown near the top of search results more often than someone that would promote at a lower amount. So it's really up to you. I just do 2% by default. Taco Casa King asks, how is it legal for eBay to skim off our shipping costs? Well, Taco, I don't know. Is eBay skimming off of our shipping costs? I'm not exactly sure what you mean. Maybe you mean that they calculate the final value fee that you get charged as a seller on the total sale price, which includes the shipping cost. Is that what you mean? There's nothing illegal about that. It's their platform. They can do it. The reason they do that, by the way, is because a long time ago, when they only charged the final value fee based on the sale price and not the shipping cost, unethical sellers would sell things for $1 with $99 in shipping, so that they would only be charged final value fees calculated off the $1. And so eBay, rightly so, was like, hey, don't do that. So instead, they just consider the total sale cost, including the cost to ship, to get your final value fee off of. They also include things like sales tax, which I know a lot of sellers get upset about having to pay final value fees on the sales tax as well. But keep in mind, collecting and remitting the sales tax, which eBay does for you, is a service, right? That's not free to provide that service. If you had to do it yourself, it would be a total pain. You would have to collect the sales tax and remit it to every single state. So you wouldn't want to do that. But it takes time and effort for them to collect that sales tax and remit it to the state. So the fact that they charge the final value fee, including the sales tax, I don't really care. Like, they got to pay for that somehow. So.
Hi, Justin. I've contacted eBay for Business through Facebook Messenger several times in the past to have issues resolved. Today, when I went on, I found that the page was no longer available, neither the full Facebook page or the Messenger chat. I was curious if you are aware of this, if you know if it's a permanent issue, and if you have any recommendations for other good ways to reach eBay, as this way seemed to be the most efficient way for me to have issues resolved. Thanks.
Yeah, Kelly, I have heard that. I've heard other reports of people trying to access that eBay for Business page, which is no longer there. And eBay has spoken out about this, and they said they're pulling all of that business support back in-house and are providing ways, within the eBay interface itself to get in contact with support representatives from an eBay for Business type customer. I've never used the Facebook interface to do that. I very rarely reach out to eBay in the first place. And so I don't have a whole lot to say on this specifically, only to confirm that, yes, they have moved their eBay for Business support off of Facebook and are going in-house with it. I think eBay has also said that, the same people are involved. They're not sending those support requests offshore, for example. They're going to stay with the people who are doing it. They're just changing the interface. That's what they've said. I can't comment anything beyond that. I'm not affiliated with eBay, so I can't really say exactly what's going on. But yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. I know a lot of people have had a lot of success getting things done through that eBay for Business portal on Facebook. Hopefully, the support remains the same, and really just the interface and the place where you contact them are changing. That's my hope, but I don't know. So we'll see. I guess time will tell. Steve asks, is there any advantage to same-day shipping versus one day? Yeah, there is a difference and an advantage. I mean, basically, it's a little bit more attractive for a potential buyer that you ship same day versus waiting one day to ship. I would say that the advantages are minimal. I think most buyers don't necessarily expect things to ship the same day. A lot of buyers, thanks to Amazon, expect that they ship by the next day, but same day shipping. So if you can work it out for your business, and you can actually set on eBay like a cutoff time, like this is my same day handling cutoff time is like noon, so that if anything comes in after that, it's not subject to the same day shipping rule. So maybe there's some buyers out there that think it's attractive, but my guess is that the advantages are very minimal. Personally, I do next day shipping, so we ship Monday through Friday, but I don't know, give it a shot. Give same day shipping a shot. See if it increases your sales, if you can make it work. Bad Tupram asks, hey Justin, quick question if you have time. I'm so hyped to get started again. I've sold on eBay before, but it's been years and I'm trying to decide on a camera. I don't have a smartphone at the moment, so that's not an option for me. Would you recommend a nice budget camera that I could start out with? Yeah, if you don't have a smartphone, that is my recommendation, is to take your photos with a smartphone, because you can take them directly in the eBay app. You don't have to bother with transferring them on an SD card or wirelessly or anything like that. You just upload them directly to the eBay listing as you're creating the listing itself. It's super, super fast. But if you don't have a smartphone, I would really consider lighting first. Lighting is the most important thing when taking good pictures. Any digital camera built in the last 10 years is going to take more than adequate pictures for eBay. So you could just go to a thrift store and find a point and shoot, or a garage sale and find a point and shoot that, from Canon for $10, and it's going to do the job. But you want to invest your money in lighting, and you don't have to invest a lot of money. You can go on Amazon and find a lighting kit for $50, and it's going to work really well. So I would invest in lighting and then a really cheap digital camera, and that should get you going. Leland asks, how do you determine which of your listings are oldest in order to end and sell similar? I only see choices like ending soonest or newly listed. Thank you for your calm and reasoned videos. You're welcome. It's actually really easy to do this. What you want to do is you open up your seller hub, which I will do here, and you go to listings and active, and then you click on the column header where it says start date right here. And you click that once, and clicking that is going to show everything in chronological order with the oldest on top. So if you want to end and relist a bunch of your older listings, do that. Select 5 or 6 off the top there, end and relist. So pretty easy. Erica asks, hi Justin, how are you? I'm good, how are you? Question for you, if I may. In your opinion, which one do you think the algorithm likes best? Listing daily or scheduling listings? Many thanks. So again, Total guesses here. Anyone who talks about the eBay algorithm who's not eBay specifically are just taking a guess. So I will give you my guess here, and that it doesn't matter at all. eBay gives you the option to schedule listings. Why would they penalize you for using that option? I think it's totally fine. Just the big thing is get your items listed. Get your items out of your death pile, get them onto eBay. Whether you're listing daily or scheduling so that they go live daily later, doesn't really matter. Just get them live. Don asks, how do you handle sales tax? Hi, Don. I don't handle sales tax. eBay handles it for you, fortunately. So you don't have to worry about it at all. eBay makes sure that they're collecting sales tax from buyers dependent on their specific region. They charge the buyer, and then they later remit that sales tax back out to the state on your behalf. So you don't have to worry about it.